wake up in a box. It's the same box you've lived inside for years now. A narrow space, not much bigger than your body, set into a platform under a bed. It's just big enough for you, a sleeping bag, and a bedpan. It's both better and worse than your situation was before in the last place you lived. That box was even smaller. But there was a workshop where you stayed at night doing little tasks like shelling walnuts or making macrame, and that had a chair. You never thought you'd miss that tiny space, but you do. You're not always in the box. Sometimes you're brought out and you're chained up in the bathroom. Sometimes you get to work outside in the garden or do chores around the house. And sometimes, too often, far, far too often, horrible, terrible things happen to you while you're outside of the box but chained up. But you try not to focus on those. You try not to focus on the man who picked you up off the street one spring day in May of 1977, a man you thought seemed nice because he had a wife and infant daughter with him in the car, a man with a pleasant smile and a kind face who seemed like a normal family man, caring enough to give a lone hitchhiker a ride. His name was Cameron Hooker, and he proved to be anything but normal or kind or nice or caring. You're a true master at compartmentalization by now, so you focus on the peaceful times, when you're caring for two young girls or cleaning up around the house. Sometimes you're even allowed to go into town, to shop, to run errands. At one point, you'll be allowed to have a job, a real job, making real money, with people who know your face and know where you live, people who could help you. But you don't tell them what's happening to you. You don't leave. You can't. In the early months of your kidnapping, the man explained it to you. You were now a slave and one of many, part of a human trafficking ring known as the Company. The Company dealt in flesh and young women like you and made sure that they stayed with their owners. For a registration fee that your kidnapper paid, they promised to track you down if you managed to escape and to put you through torture far worse than anything you'd experienced at his hands. And if you tried to tell anyone what was happening with you, they would kill them as well. They had the house bugged. They had your family's houses bugged. They had eyes everywhere. Resistance was futile, your kidnapper told you, and you believed him. Every time you thought about running, in your mind, the Company was there, faceless, all-powerful, and terrifying. Every sound outside the walls, every car pulling into a driveway, every unexpected phone call could mean surveillance, could mean punishment, could mean death. You're Colleen Stan, someone who will become known in the press as the girl in the box. And your life, thanks to a man named Cameron Hooker, is hell on earth. This is the fascinating and terrifying true story I'm sharing on this week's True Crime Stockholm Syndrome Unprecedented Trial Edition of Timesuck.
This is Michael McDonald, and you're listening to Timesuck.
You're listening to Timesuck.
Well, happy Monday, and welcome back to the Cult of the Curious. I'm Dan Cummins, Suck Nasty, guy who forgot to mention that the last name of last week's serial killer was literally one letter away from shithole. Audio torturer, meat sack with whatever brain abnormality allows me to pronounce many South African words better than American words, and you are listening to Timesuck. Hail Nimrod, hail Lucifina, praise be to good boy Bojangles, the bestest boy, and glory be as always to Triple M. Oh, Michael motherfucking McDonald. Heard that some of you did not care for that masturbation sound, that little sound bed being played last week. I have no idea what you're talking about. I certainly would never do that to you. Sounds like some kind of CNN hoax. Fake news. Never happened. Stop pretending that it did. Thank you for your attention to this matter. Relax, guy. But for real, there will be none of that today. You're safe. Sorry about releasing last week's episode 3 days early. Not that that is a bad thing, I guess. I was admittedly rushing when I set that episode up for distribution. I was at Wet Hot Bad Magic Summer Camp 2025, Summer Love, trying to prepare a Nightmare Fuel live story that had to be written for the live show last minute for reasons you know if you were there. And speaking of summer camp, holy shit, I'm still riding high on how amazing camp was as I record this on Tuesday evening, September 9th. I have loved this community for so long, but I feel extra protective of it now. It was just so great to hear, to see how much it means to a lot of very, very sweet, very kind people. At camp, there was just so much diversity, heterosexual couples, homosexual couples, traditional relationships, open relationships, religious people, atheists, spiritualists, white, black, Asian, Hispanic, cis folks, transgender folks. Not one person told me they felt picked on or unsafe or excluded. So many beautiful, inclusive folks. The only kind I would ever want to come to camp. Not gonna lie, the biggest demo camp was bearded white dudes like myself and their partners, but also a lot of women came alone, which speaks to how safe this community tends to be. No fights, so much love. I didn't speak to anyone who felt judged, and I spoke to over 400 of the campers in various meet and greets, people crying over how accepted they felt, how they needed a recharge, a reprieve from feeling alone in the communities where they live normally, just feeling like their batteries were recharged, a little faith in humanity restored, and I just kept thinking, fucking this. This is how the world should be. So many people spoke of having some faith, and humanity restored, and I felt that too. The camp staff just kept telling Lindsay and I that our fans were just the most lovely people, and we agreed. They're fucking right. And sweet, by the way, doesn't mean weak, despite what so many emboldened fucking shitheads, fake tough guys preach today in our fucking sick culture in many ways. Definitely some people at camp I sure wouldn't want to face off with in a fight or in a bench press or deadlift competition. We had active duty military, first responders, veterans. In addition to being tough, they were sensitive, cool, fucking funny. What a wonderful thing. So just a huge thank you from the bottom of my heart, truly, to everybody who came out. I've never been more excited to do it again. Tickets are going on sale to next year's summer camp, Tuesday, September 22nd at noon Pacific time, when you can go to badmagicproductions.com. The 90 new private cabins being built right now will be available, and those tickets will probably go first. Camp will be held September 10th to the 13th, 2026. And it'll be back at the same place with the fucking best staff. All those wonderful Irish and Australian visa holders over here doing fucking awesome things. In Equinunk, Pennsylvania. Thank you for your attention to this matter. It always cracks me up now. And just thank you. And now, a topic that brings us back to kidnapping. Such a bizarre and terrifying side of true crime. Just like the idea that a person, some stranger, somebody that you've literally never fucking met before, never done anything to before, could simply decide that you're the one they want, and you're not a person anymore. You're not somebody with free will. You're an object for them to keep and do with what they want. And then after having made that decision, they can acquire a few locks, a couple sets of handcuffs, maybe some chains and a gag, all things that are pretty easy to come by, all things considered. And then they could just have you for whatever they fucking want to do with you. No consideration for the pain that they're causing you. No consideration for the pain they're causing your family, your friends, anybody else who knows or likes or loves you because you're missing now. No consideration for anyone or anything other than their own twisted desires. You might be with them for a couple days, couple weeks, couple months, the rest of your fucking life until they finally decide to kill you. Right? You're at the mercy of their whims. You don't know what's in store for you in the future or if you'll even have a future. That not knowing just would have to mentally torture you. Maybe your kidnapper also tortures you physically and otherwise. Maybe they beat you. Maybe they sexually assault you. Maybe they starve you. Maybe they force you to stay in a small confined spot while they go about their normal day, working, hanging out with family, all the things that they decided that you have no right to do, only to return to force their extremely abnormal sexual fantasies upon you. And in a twisted way, this is preferable to the alternative because the alternative is killing you. What a mindfuck, right? Let's dig into this week's haunting, but ultimately inspirational story. To add insult to injury, your mindfuck state might also make it very, very difficult to litigate long-term kidnapping. Because sometimes survival looks like doing things that you would normally never do, like being kind to your torturous captor, proclaiming your love for them, even joining their cause and helping them commit crimes. Like in the case of Suck alum Patty Hearst from episode 206, the heiress who was kidnapped by the Symbionese Liberation Army in February of 1974 and 10 weeks later participated in the robbery of the Hibernia Bank in San Francisco. Or Hibernia, excuse me. Patty appeared to adopt the group's ideology, and indeed she would be convicted of bank robbery and using a firearm and sentenced to 7 years in prison, with many people believing that Patty had simply turned to radicalism of her own free will. The tricky part of our justice system is that you can't ever fully get inside someone's mind to figure out exactly what was going on when they did or said something. Were they coerced? How coerced were they? Do you have to fear for your life physically to be coerced, or can you just be under severe mental strain? While we could cover the history of Stockholm Syndrome or research into brainwashing, we know a lot about that stuff already from the many, many cult episodes we've already covered here. And as much as Colleen's case will present a legal conundrum to litigate when she finally gets free in 1984, it probably wouldn't today. We've come a long way from the Cold War era panic about brainwashing when people imagined sinister hypnotists and KGB agents turning a human mind into a radio. Thanks to decades of psychology, sociology, neuroscience, today we know that what gets labeled as brainwashing is less about some magic formula and more about a messy tangle of coercion, repetition, social pressure, and emotional manipulation. Cult recruiters, propagandists, and abusive partners don't implant thoughts so much as they wear people down, cut them off from alternative sources of meaning, and then flood them with simplified narratives that feel safe and totalizing. Our sharper understanding doesn't make the phenomenon less frightening, but it does make it less mysterious. Instead of ghosts in the machine, we're dealing with predictable vulnerabilities in human cognition. The same biases and shortcuts that advertisers and fucking politicians rely on, just in a more diluted way. For Colleen Stan, however, that wouldn't be the case. Thanks to a culture that was still very much steeped in the she wanted it rape culture narrative, combined with a lack of understanding about the human brain under duress, and a small-town rural culture that wanted to naively believe that their neighbors were always kind, decent people with no skeletons in their closets, the story of Colleen Stan would initially seem to be so fucking crazy, so absolutely batshit insane, that nobody thought it happened the way she, and also Cameron Hooker's wife and accomplice Janice, said it did. Women, right? They're just so emotional, hysterical even. You can't fucking trust what they come up with in their little lady brains, can you? So many dumb fuck, fragile ego, weak-ass dudes believe that back when this happened. Men who desperately wanted to believe shit like that because they're too weak or chicken shit to put in the work to amass personal accomplishments that would speak to them actually maybe being superior in some way. Instead, they lean into some misguided notion of superiority attached to gender, a gender they happen to have been born into. Men who believe that authoritarian-like power over others, weaker than them in some ways, a testament to some kind of alpha masculinity, instead of realizing that true strength lies in empathy, compassion, and understanding, and using one's power to protect others, to understand others, to help others, not oppress or abuse them. So many weak-minded, fake tough guy dudes still around today, the kind of scum who love Andrew Tate. That guy's such a fucking piece of shit. And other incelosphere weirdos and losers. But anyways, Cameron Hooker's wife, Janice, and Cameron Hooker's captive, Colleen Stan, were right. It did happen, how they said it did. Today we'll cover this wild story, from Cameron's relatively normal upbringing to the development of his decidedly abnormal fantasies, the way he targeted his wife, Janice, when she was barely a teenager, and the agreement the two of them would come to that she could have a baby if he in return got what he wanted, a sex slave, a living, breathing young woman whom he could literally keep in a box.
Strap on those boots, soldier. We're marching down a Timesuck timeline.
Nothing in Cameron Hooker's upbringing would have jumped out as a red flag as to the kind of person he was going to grow up to be. He was raised in a seemingly traditional, warm, and caring family. No child abuse, no divorce, no domestic abuse. He couldn't even remember ever seeing any major arguments between his parents. Sometimes bad kids just happened to good parents. Sad but true. I relate a lot more than I wish I did. Both my kids, my son Kyler, my daughter Monroe, fucking suck, bro. And I've done everything 100% right. But they're still, despite my best efforts, a couple pieces of shit. Selfish, ugly, dumb, they smell bad, lazy, creepy. Possibly, if not certainly, demonically possessed. Babies hate them, pets whimper in their presence. Elderly people start to weep, openly cry out for help when they're near. JK, I feel very, very lucky. I don't seem to have a kid who appears to be on a dark path. Not yet. I feel terrible for any parent who does, truly. They're not always a product of their upbringing. Sometimes the nature and the nature versus nurture debate is very strong and just overpowering. Sometimes that nature is very, very bad. The only thing possibly stressful that stands out about Cameron's childhood might be some impermanence. There we go. Cameron was born in Altours, California, November 5th, 1953, to a couple who had moved out of their hometown of Delight, Arkansas, in search of a better life. What a nice name for a town, by the way. Delight, Arkansas. I don't know how delightful it is. It's very tiny, a couple hundred people, but maybe it's great. Harold, born in 1929, and Lorena Hooker, born in August of 1933, were ordinary people, not highly skilled or well-educated, and they often struggled to make ends meet. But they seemed to be good folks. While Cameron was growing up, they moved every 2 or 3 years due to his father pursuing work in construction or in sawmills, while his mom usually stayed home to take care of him and his younger brother, Dexter. Too bad this Dexter was not like the fictional serial killer / vigilante Dexter Morgan. Too bad he didn't take his brother out when he grew up. The boys' family life was secure, but they were constantly being uprooted, packing up, leaving school, saying goodbye almost as soon as they'd made friends. Cameron was generally quiet, kept to himself, though he was described as a happy kid in grammar school. He used to entertain the other children by doing things like pretending he had a button in the middle of his back, and if anybody pressed it, he would fall to the ground and play dead. And that is pretty cute. He liked the way the girls giggled when he did that routine and similar routines. I get it. And some other kids started to think I was funny in 3rd grade, and man, I loved it. When the cute girls in class would smile and laugh over something I said or did. It felt great. His sociable side started to fade around the time the Hooker family bought some property south of Red Bluff, California in 1969 when he was 16, and finally parked their mobile home at a permanent address. 16, that is a tough age to move. I do also get that. My dad moved me back to Riggins, Idaho from Las Vegas, Nevada, right when I got settled into life in Las Vegas when I was 16. And yeah, it sucked. Would have sucked a lot more if I would have moved to some place where I didn't already know people. Red Bluff is the county seat of Tehama County, California, about 130 miles north of Sacramento, just 30 miles south of Redding. Today, the population is 14,710. As of the recent 2020 census, back in 1970, population about half that, at 7,676. And now the Hookers were 4 of that number. Quick suck connection to this town, Mary Brown, widow of John Brown, the badass abolitionist, and her family lived in Red Bluff from 1864 until 1870. Her house at 135 Main Street, built for her by the citizens of Red Bluff. How cool. A state historic landmark now. Red Bluff's Main Street is adorable. Lots of cool buildings from the late 19th, and early 20th centuries. Cameron was a sophomore in high school in the throes of puberty when his family moved to Red Bluff. He was a tall kid who would eventually grow to be 6'4" tall. Used to being the tallest kid in the class. Now he seemed to be growing inches overnight, shooting up to become the most gangly, skinny kid on the block. With his heavy horn-rimmed glasses, toothy smile, uncoordinated limbs, Cameron was decidedly not part of the popular crowd in his small-town high school. And having gone to both a huge high school many years ago in Las Vegas, Bonanza High School, where there was about 650 kids in my class, and also being part of a small high school, Salmon River High in Riggins, Idaho, where there were just over 20 kids in my class, it is harder, I think, to move into the cool kids crowd in a small school where literally everybody knows you. The other kids, if they pigeonhole you into one group, not the cool kids group, almost impossible to move up into the cool kids group because the groups are all just so small, so tightly connected and bound together. At Red Bluff High School, Cameron got stuck in what was called the Quad Squad. A group of outcasts tended to hang out in the quad. And being a member of the Quad Squad did not bring any friends into his life. It was less of a group, more of just a collection of outcasts, collection of students who no other group wanted. Cameron was a loner. He wouldn't join any organizations or play any sports at this high school. He did excel in shop classes, learning about tools and machines. He barely passed his other classes. And it wasn't because he didn't have enough time to study, because he was working, or because he was working a lot of hours at some after-school job, whatever. He actually had tons of free time, lots of time to think. In particular, lots of time to think about nude-bound women, helpless and at his mercy. And here we go again, right? Man, parents, check in with your kids about sex. Talk to them about it. Talk to them about porn. Talk to them about how unrealistic pornography can be, how it doesn't always portray the proper amount of mutual respect or show obvious consent. It's unclear exactly when Cameron discovered pornography, if it was before or after fantasies like this entered his mind, but it certainly didn't help. He would tell a girl named Elaine Corning, also 16 years old, that he wished that he had a fucking dungeon under his parents' house where he could hold women captive. Wish I knew how Elaine responded to that. What a fucking crazy thing to hear. I mean, she had to have told everyone. She knew that he said that, right? so everyone at high school must have gossiped about it at one point. If some kid at Riggins talked about wanting to keep a girl locked up in a basement, everyone would for sure have heard about that. Guessing that did not help with his popularity. That is obviously quite creepy. When he graduated from high school in 1972, Cameron went to work at the local lumber mill, Diamond Lands Corporation. It was a manly occupation, working around large, powerful, deafening machinery, ear-splitting saws, heavy black chains. His dad, he worked at some mills. Not sure if he also worked at this one, but I think he did. So he's familiar with this kind of work. And again, Cameron had done well in shop classes, so he did have some talent for it. But within the lumber mill is the new guy, and the very young guy, he's at the bottom of the totem pole. And he would stay there. And he's also just fucking weird, right? So like he'd been in high school, he's not part of the cool crowd. While there, Cameron continued to fixate on his fantasy of female imprisonment, to have a woman he could use as a sex toy, use however he wanted. And he leaned even further into his dreams, the ones where he found a girl and hid her away, controlling everything she did. Unfortunately, in the 1970s, in rural America in particular, a form of this kind of relationship wasn't all that hard to come by in a conventional way, especially if you dated younger. And in 1973, a mutual friend introduced 19-year-old Cameron to 15-year-old Janice, a shy, insecure girl with frizzy brown hair, wire-rimmed glasses, and a developing figure that did not match her innocent demeanor. Like Cameron's family, her family did not put much of an emphasis on education. They never had much money. They weren't native to Red Bluff. Her family had moved from the San Jose area a few years before. They'd moved into a tiny house not very far from the Hookers, with an orchard and not a lot else. Janice was the youngest of 4 kids, the baby of the family. But her family was not like Cameron's. Her parents, not particularly warm or loving. Her dad was distant, rumored to be physically abusive, worked long hours at various blue-collar jobs, wasn't around much. Mom, very strict, also not around a lot. She would work outside the home, various jobs. Janice was mostly raised by her older sister, Lisa, the family favorite, who taught her how to sew, do other little domestic tasks. But that didn't mean the sisters were close. Janice was jealous of the attention Lisa got from her parents, the love, attention, and praise that Janice so desperately wanted and definitely did not get. Janice would later say that her father said that people who had epilepsy, like she did, were literally possessed by demons. And that was why he kept his distance from her. Think about that. That's the kind of shit that makes some people hate religion, right? Her dad, because his daughter had fucking epilepsy, a known medical condition, thought she was possessed by demons. This is the 1970s, right? 1960s, 1970s. This is not the fucking 1450s, and he kept his distance. Imagine being raised by a parent who's afraid to be around you and basically hated you over a medical condition like that. Almost 500 weeks into this podcast, and I'm still continually shocked by how many dumb motherfuckers exist in the world. Unreal. Also, if that was his belief, well, then why not have a pastor exorciser, dipshit? Or maybe a pastor gave him that advice, right? If that's true, what kind of sad backwoods excuse for a church were they going to? Or maybe the pastor advised Janice's parents, just stay away from the girl. The girl is evil. Wait till she's out of your house. Just be afraid. Remove yourself emotionally. Janice would also say later that her parents never told her that they loved her, but they did tell her often that she was stupid or made similar derogatory statements about her. And this all reminds me of a comment I've seen often online lately. There's no hate like Christian love. Not true for all Christians. I know definitely many very loving Christians out there. Unfortunately, there also is a contingent of small, gross, worthless fucks like Jan's parents who seem to confuse love for hate. If you have parents like that, first, sorry that you have them. Sorry you've had to deal with them. And then second, keep in mind that just like they can disown you, you can disown them. And you probably should, right? Go make your own chosen family. Pick a better one. Fuck those clowns. Before Cameron, Janice did date other guys, but none that were really worth a shit. She would later say, no matter how rotten a guy was to me, I would just kind of latch on. She was just so desperate for love and approval. When Cameron came along, Janice fell head over heels in love with him. And of course she did. He was the first guy to really love bomb her, to shower her with the attention, the affection, the love she craved from her dad, but never got. Well, maybe there wasn't love. I don't know if Cameron actually loved her. He liked her. He, lusted after her. She was non-threatening and pliant. She liked him, because he was nice to her, gentlemanly, polite, with a big smile. They started to date, going out for drives, burgers and fries. They'd go watch horror movies at the theater like The Exorcist. And then soon Cameron told her that he had another activity in mind for them. He told her that he wanted to hang her up, to suspend her from her wrists from a tree without her clothes on, He told her his other girlfriends had let him do that. They hadn't. And that lots of people did it. Such classic manipulation. Come on, everybody's doing it. Don't be such a bore. Just let me suspend you by your wrists naked from a tree like all other girls enjoy. What are you, some kind of weird tree and rope hating prude? You're probably the only girl over the age of like 12 in all of Tehama County who hasn't hung naked from a tree at least once, you dork. Well, not wanting to lose her boyfriend, young Janice went along with that bullshit. Cameron took her into the nearby mountains, strapped her into his handmade leather cuffs. Dude was already making shit to prepare for this, and he hung her up. Janice was, unsurprisingly, immediately terrified. And in pain. The leather cuffs hurt. Her shoulders hurt. Being suspended like that's not fucking good for you. Pain shot down her arms and back. But Cameron was so nice to her when he did let her down. Holding her, hugging her, grateful, thrilled that she had agreed to do this. And so she agreed to do it again. These excursions into the woods now became a regular day. 2 or 3 times a month, Cameron would take Janice out to Tehama County's vast woodlands to experiment with strange fantasies. Sometimes he would tie her up so she hung. Sometimes he would stake her down to the ground. Whatever he did, it always frightened her. She never got over that. But she liked the attention she got afterwards, when Cameron would be so sweet to her, so grateful. So she put up with it. And of course, it would escalate. It almost always does, right? Soon, Cameron began bringing out whips into the woods to beat her. Not hard enough to leave permanent marks, but hard enough to leave welts. Hard enough to hurt. Janice endured that as well. He also soon took photographs of her naked body in all these various configurations. She had no idea when this started what sadism even meant or masochism. She wasn't excited to explore the BDSM lifestyle. She didn't know that this was even a somewhat common or at least known sexual fetish. It just seemed to make him happy. And she was happy when he was happy. So when he said that he wanted to tie her up and then dunk her in the creek, she agreed to that as well. And Janice nearly drowned before he brought her back up. That finally signaled to her that this was serious. In doing these things for him, she could actually die. But at this point, she was too afraid to tell anyone, too embarrassed that she'd agreed to do what she'd already done, and Cameron now had pictures of her in many of these situations that he would threaten to share if she didn't go along with what he wanted. And so now she begins to compartmentalize. Aside from the strange experiments, he did seem nice. He would take her to places she'd never been. He would teach her to do stuff like water ski and downhill snow ski. Despite his flaws, despite the fear, Janice was in love. Or at least she thought she was. And she wanted to marry him. There was just one problem with that. Her older sister had waited till she was 18 to marry. That was the deal that their parents made. She figured she'd have to wait till she was 18 as well. But then Jan decided to lie and say she was pregnant. Her parents, they weren't thrilled, but they gave her permission to marry Cameron. They were probably happy to rid themselves of their demon child. And if they'd seen the photos that Cameron was taking of their daughter, they probably would have really thought she was a demon. Hanging naked from a tree getting whipped? What in the satanic summoning ritual kind of shit is this, Janice? Instead of a big ceremony, or fucking any ceremony, they gave her $500. And I don't think they even attended the wedding. Janice will later say that she thought the real reason her parents let her get married before she turned 18 was because her parents, as I mentioned, did just want to get rid of her. Cameron and Janice were wed January 18th, 1975 in Reno, Nevada. The young bride and groom said their vows, seemingly full of love and hope for the future, but they didn't have much of a future to look forward to. Janice, still 16, had dropped out of high school. Cameron had what was pretty much a dead-end job at the mill and no ambitions for moving up. He talked to wanting to go into construction. He'd written in his senior yearbook that that was what he was going to do, but just never seemed to get around to taking that leap, to going for it. The very young couple barely scraped by on Cameron's lumber mill laborer wages, moved into a unit in a cheap row of duplexes, boxy structures with little character, and a shared cement alley for a front yard. Cameron didn't care. It had room for what he wanted, and all he really wanted was more bondage, more sexual fantasies, more experiments. In the bedroom, the experiments continued, and they got more extreme. Sometimes Cameron would choke Jan until she completely passed out. One day, Cameron produced an Army surplus gas mask, its eyes and air holes taped over. Jan turned him down for that one. Maybe for the first time ever. The modified gas mask fucking terrified her. But Cameron would not take no for an answer. And once he had her tied up again, he forced the mask on her, after he had first gagged her to keep her screams from being heard by the neighbors, when he fitted it over her head. Quite the marriage. And again, she is still the age of a high schooler. Already, Jan is starting to have some regrets. Maybe Jan would have been able to continue to rationalize it all if it had stayed in the bedroom, if he was consistently nice to her afterwards the way he had always been before they'd got married, but increasingly the violence was bleeding over into their real lives. Not long into their marriage, when Janice and Cameron had a fight, he got so mad he put a knife to her throat, asked her if she wanted to die. Another time, Cameron showed her a scene in one of his underground newspapers, some kind of horrific crucifixion, and he told her that if he ever killed her, that was how he was going to do it. And sometimes now it seemed like he might actually kill her. From Cameron's perspective, though, he didn't actually plan on killing her or even want to, but he was getting bored with her. He'd had unrestricted access to her body for a couple of years now, and it just no longer excited him the way it used to. He started fantasizing about something else, adding a third person to the relationship, or the way he put it, a girl who couldn't say no. A girl who would have to take everything that Jan refused to. And so perhaps thinking her husband would really kill her if she didn't agree to this, or maybe because she was now just too beaten down to try to keep all his fantasies in check any longer, Jan agreed with one caveat. She did not want this girl replacing her, so she said that Cameron could not have sex with her. That would naturally be reserved for husband and wife, of course. You know, fair is fair. What a strange rationalization to make. Can you imagine? Okay, fine. Yes, I'll go along with your kidnapping, imprisoning, and sexually torturing some random innocent young woman, but we have to protect our marriage. You can keep her captive. You can beat her. I get that now. You can stare at her naked, bound body and jerk off. You can shove sex toys in her while she tries to scream for help. But I swear to God, if you ever stick your hard dick inside her vagina, I'm out of here. I just won't be able to respect myself anymore. The fucking lines people draw. It was unclear how they would find this girl. The underground papers, some kind of fetish extreme BDSM pulp magazines Cameron read, always had lots of like a hookup listings in the back of them, kind of like Craigslist or whatever. They thought maybe they could run an ad, find somebody who wanted to be a sex slave, somebody willing to consent, not having any consent anymore. But most of the ads were from people in the San Francisco Bay Area, and they might not be willing to travel. Also, money was tight, might be expensive. Running an ad, bringing somebody into their home from there. The woman might want to be paid for each sexual activity or each nude photo. That was a problem. But the biggest problem of all was that, any arrangement they would make would just be temporary. And Cameron, that's not what he wanted. He wanted somebody he could keep for years until he thoroughly grew tired of them. As Cameron explored this fantasy further, Janice kept voicing concerns that he would fall in love, that he would leave her. Crazy that concerns over this other person's well-being did not seem to appear to be an issue for her. Eventually, they started to negotiate. She needed a sign of deep commitment to help, her proceed with his plan. She decided that she wanted a baby. By now, this is insane. By now, they'd found a better house, 1140 Oak Street, small 2-bedroom house with yards in the front and the back, hardwood floors, nice dining room, a basement. House was owned by an elderly couple named in sources Mr. and Mrs. Letty. They're still living in the small town of Red Bluff, where both their families also still live. That is not the setting I expected for a story like this. And now with the deal in place, baby for sex slave, Cameron got to work. With boards brought home from the Diamond Lumber Yard where he still worked, Cameron would construct a wide table, a platform really, that he dubbed the rack. He affixed eye hooks at each corner so the leather cuffs he had made could be easily attached when he wanted to stake out Janice. He put additional hooks and a beam in the ceiling for hanging. Then he built another box, a smaller one, for a different purpose that you'll see later. Cameron was a skilled woodworker, but that didn't get him any further when it came to finding the right girl. In between shifts at work, Cameron assembled his strange sexual equipment, staked out a few women in his car, snapped their photos with his telephoto lens, but nothing panned out. Maybe Red Bluff was too small of a town to try and get away with taking a local girl. They would, however, soon make an attempt to take a girl from a nearby town. Late in January of 1976, Jan and Cameron Hooker were driving their blue Dodge Colt in Chico, a town just 40 minutes away from Red Bluff, when Cameron spotted a young woman with long, dark hair walking alongside the road, alone. He stopped, he offered her a ride, she got in, sat in the back seat, told him her name was Marliz, short for Marie Elizabeth, and she asked him to drop her off at an apartment off of Rio Lindo Avenue, and they agreed. When they arrived, Jan opened the door to let her out, but as Marliz started to get out, Cameron grabbed her by the hair, pulled her back in, and then Jan jumped in behind her. Holy shit. Jamming her head down between the car's bucket seats, he drove off. With some difficulty, Cameron restrained her. They drove down a dirt road, tied her up, put her head inside a box that hinged at the neck. This is that special box Cameron just made, but no shop skill classes to work. or shop class skills to work, rather. Before going home, Cameron and Janice stopped at the Jolly Cone, a little local fast food place, and got themselves something to eat. That feels wild. Feels like if you're planning on kidnapping somebody and imprisoning them in your home, maybe after grabbing them, you should head directly to where you're going. Maybe not stop for burgers, fries, and milkshakes. By then it was dark. Mara Liz was driven to the house at 1140 Oak Street. The burger stop had not mattered after all. Cameron parked in the garage, took the head box off of Mara Liz, left her with Jan for a moment while he went to unlock the house, still tied up. Mara Liz pleaded, of course, desperately with Jan to please let her go. Not knowing what would happen, Jan tried to reassure her, saying that everything was going to be okay. It's fucking crazy. Then Cameron came back, called Mara Liz into the house, took her down into the basement. Jan stayed upstairs while he stripped off his captive's clothes and hung her up by her wrists. For some reason, maybe because she was screaming, he then decided to cut her vocal cords. Jesus. After that, weak and dizzy from the loss of blood, Mara Liz indicated she wanted a pencil and a paper. She wrote in a note that she said she was willing to call her boyfriend who would bring them a ransom. But Cameron didn't want a ransom. He wanted to have his fun. That night, he would shoot her several times in the abdomen with a pellet gun, seemingly just for fun, and then he strangled her to death. What the fuck? At about 2 a.m., Cameron and Jan wrapped the body in a blanket, loaded it into the trunk of the car. They headed north to Highway 44, drove into the mountains. Snow was falling lightly. They drove for a while before turning onto a muddy side road and coming to a stop. Cameron got out and dug a grave. And they buried her, arriving back in Red Bluff just as dawn broke. Later, Cameron would burn Marie Elizabeth Spanicki's ID. That's her full name, Marie Elizabeth Spanicki. Would burn her ID, purse, other personal belongings at Dog Island Park, a couple miles away from their house on Oak Street. Mara Liz's murder was not expected, not part of Cameron's plan, not part of his fantasy. He didn't show any remorse over what he had done, though, but it also didn't satisfy him. He wanted a live sex slave. Somebody who would do his bidding. He'd only killed because he had lost control of the situation, because he didn't know how to do things in the order he needed to ensure her total submission, how to keep her from alerting the neighbors. And he vowed to change that next time. Meanwhile, Janice stays with him after that. She's now complicit in a murder, and I imagine doesn't want to rat on him and thus rat on herself and go to prison. So instead, she pushed Cameron to have the baby she wanted. Some crazy that some part of her thought that she could still have a good life, raise a child with a man who just murdered a woman she had helped kidnap. Maybe she did have a little demon in her. Soon she did get pregnant, and they had a girl, Catherine, who will go by Kathy in the fall of 1976. A new baby will not stop Cameron, of course, from trying again. They'd made a deal. He still wanted his end of the bargain. And on May 19th, 1977, just 2 days after I was born, which feels weird, especially since my dad was working at a sawmill in 1977, pretty close to a lumber yard. My dad also lived in the Northwest with a young wife and a baby at home. At the end of his shift at Diamond, Cameron Hooker came home from work as usual about 4 o'clock. Picked up his wife and baby, and they went for a drive. Not sure if my dad was with him or not. I do wish Dad Watch would have been around back then. Not sure if baby me was along for the ride or not. Let's just say not. I don't want to be part of the story. They drove around for half an hour or so, and then he saw her. 20-year-old Colleen Stan, so young. She had left Eugene, Oregon that morning at around 11 a.m. Her roommates, Alice and Bob, had driven her to the freeway. She stood at the side of the road under the gray Eugene sky, looking like just another hitchhiker in a town dominated by the University of Oregon students. Many of them frequent hitchhikers at this time. That's crazy. We just took Monroe on a campus tour of University of Oregon in Eugene just a little over a month ago. I can still picture it clearly. Colleen wore a plaid wool Pendleton, jeans, and earth shoes. She was medium height, medium build, had thick tawny hair so long it brushed against the small of her back. She was headed to Westwood, a small town in Northern California, not the neighborhood of Los Angeles. Small town of about 2,000 people, back where her friend Linda lived. Colleen had grown up down in SoCal in Riverside, California. She'd had a pretty stable childhood there, all things considered. Born Colleen Jean Martin on December 31st, 1956, Colleen's parents had divorced when she was just 3, and her 2 younger sisters, Janice and Bobby Sue, were infants, but neither parent moved away from Riverside. Colleen was mostly raised by her mom, a sociable, chatty woman, but she stayed close to her dad, Jack, quiet guy who worked as a contractor. As a kid, she played with her younger sisters, made average progress in school, and at some point developed a penchant for poetry. Her love language was definitely gifting. She loved to make and design cards or make gifts for people just to let them know that, they were special, that she was thinking about them. She didn't have much of an interest in academics, and at 16, she dropped out of high school and quickly got married to 22-year-old Tom Stan. Colleen's father gave her permission, and she and Tom got married in Carson City, Nevada, December 12, 1973. Colleen just a few days shy of 17 years old. Man, I think about being too young to have gotten married when I got married for the first time when I was 23. Looking back, just fucking so young. My brain literally wasn't fully developed yet. Cannot imagine getting married at 16. People who marry before the age of 18 have a significantly higher risk of divorce than those who marry later, with some studies in recent years suggesting a 45% risk of divorce for teenage marriages and a 48% likelihood of divorce within 10 years for those marrying under 18. According to a 2024 CDC study, marriages that occur at the age of 18 years or younger have a 10% probability of breaking up after just a year, and that likelihood increases to 29% after 5 years for marriages, again, where at least one person's age 18 or younger. You're so young, so inexperienced when it comes to, who you really are and what you really want out of life. Colleen moved with her new husband to his home state of Ohio, but they started having problems almost immediately. The marriage dissolved. Within a year, Colleen had returned to Riverside, and now she refocused on her education. Good for her. She passed her GED, held a couple jobs, moved around Riverside a bit as she tried to get her bearings, had a couple of boyfriends, also made friends with a couple from Oregon, Alice Walsh and her boyfriend Bob. The couple had a 2-year-old son, Tomac, and together the four were like a little family. And so when Alice and Bob decided to move back to Oregon, settling in Eugene, Colleen joined them. They all found a place together, but new jobs were hard to come by, and even with the help of welfare, it was difficult to make ends meet. During her few months in Oregon, Colleen earned what little cash she could by mostly collecting and selling moss. First time I've ever heard of anyone gathering and selling moss. Is that still a thing? Do we got any moss wranglers listening to the show? Now at 20, Colleen was living life on the fringe, not a lot of direction, but also not unhappy. She didn't have huge professional ambitions, but she's also a caring friend, a loving daughter, a great big sister, someone who never forgot to send a birthday card or call home on a special day. And now she wanted to celebrate her friend Linda's birthday with her in Westwood. Linda's birthday was on a Thursday, so Colleen told Alice that she'd be back on Saturday. Colleen figured it would be a straight shot down Interstate 5, right? The big West Coast freeway that snakes down from the Canadian border all the way down to the Mexican border, connecting Washington, Oregon, and all of California. In 2 separate rides, she made it all the way down to Red Bluff, arriving in the small town at about 4 o'clock. According to the route she had laid out, she planned to exit the freeway and head east for another 100 miles. In Red Bluff, a carload of dudes offered her a ride, but she turned them down because she felt it was too risky. That fucking sucks. How many times would she later replay that moment in her head and just think, oh my God, why did I get in that car full of dudes? Another car stopped, but the couple said they were only going a short distance, so she turned them down as well, another major regret later. Not that she could have known, obviously. And then a blue Dodge Colt pulled over, and Colleen saw a young couple in front, the woman holding the baby in her arms. They looked about Colleen's age, not very different from her roommates, Alice and Bob, not wealthy, not necessarily hippies either. The man said they were headed towards Mineral, a giant step in the right direction. So Colleen tossed in her sleeping bag and backpack and climbed into the back seat. She didn't even notice the strange wooden box in the seat next to her when she did, or the weird looks the couple were giving each other up front. Soon, however, she did notice that the driver kept giving her looks in the rearview mirror. It weirded her out a bit, but still he was amiable. And as they talked about the scenery, he chimed in with, "My brother said there were some ice caves around here. Wouldn't that be something to see? You wouldn't care if we turned for a quick look, would you?" Colleen just wanted to get to Westwood, but she figured that she couldn't make demands. It was their car after all, and she was riding for free, so she said no, she wouldn't mind a short detour at all. And soon they were off the highway, bumping down a dirt road. About a mile down the road, they stopped near a small stream. The wife got out with the baby. Then the driver climbed out, leaving Colleen in the car alone. For a moment, she thought he had wandered off. Unfortunately, that was not the case. He'd gone over to the passenger side of the car where he pulled the front seat forward, jumped in, and out of nowhere, held a knife to Colleen's throat. "Put your hands above your head," he ordered. She did so, and a pair of handcuffs flashed across her line of sight. Before she could even really process what was now happening, they snapped around her hands. He then put a piece of cloth around her eyes and tied it tightly. Next, she felt the leather strap circling her head, tightening at her cheek until the strap beneath her chin made it impossible for her to open her jaw. Then he used some rope to tie her ankles. He'd had a whole kit ready to go, including the wooden box beside her. It was made of plywood and only about the size of a hat box, but surprisingly heavy, weighing nearly 20 pounds. Inside it was covered in in dense insulation, a hinge opening a circular hole into semicircles. The interior of the box was carpeted. Colleen would come to know this as the head box. It closed around Colleen's neck with a snap. It not only shut out light, muffled sound, pinched her neck, and trapped her hair tightly against her nape, doing all but choking her. It was anything but comfortable. The man then covered her with her own sleeping bag, then called his wife over, who brought back their sleeping baby, got in the car. Then he started up the engine and turned leisurely towards home. At one point, the wife put the baby on her. Fucking weird, like put the baby on Colleen. But then the baby started crying, and the mother took her up front. Eventually, Colleen could make out traffic noises, a few at first, then more. She guessed it was Red Bluff. They waited around for a while for dark to fall, and then the Dodge pulled into an alley. The man climbed out, came around to the back seat, untied Colleen's ankle so she could walk, took off the head box. Everything else, the blindfold, the gag, the handcuffs, stayed on. He didn't want to give his hostage any chance of escaping or making too much noise. Colleen was led out of the car, up some steps, through a kitchen. Out of a narrow gap at the bottom of her blindfold, she could glimpse the base of a stove, then a refrigerator, and she was guided through a narrow door down a steep, short flight of stairs to the basement. The woman had not followed. Now it's just her and the man. "Stand up here," he barked. Awkwardly, he maneuvered her up on top of something. As she stepped up, she saw that it was a green and white Coleman ice chest. He unlocked one wrist and quickly draped the handcuffs across a pipe that ran along the ceiling, locked them up again. Now her arms were suspended above her head. He proceeded to strip off her jeans, tossing them onto the floor. He took off each handcuff briefly to take off her shirt, one arm at a time. Next, the handcuffs were replaced by wide, stiff leather bands tightened around one wrist, then the other. These were then hooked to the ceiling, her arms stretched wide apart. Colleen didn't understand what was happening until the support went out from beneath her. All of a sudden, she was dangling painfully. She wanted to cry out, but she couldn't because she's still gagged. She thrashed, kicking her legs out in the air. She searched for something to raise herself up on, but there was nothing. Then he started to whip her. The man shouted for her to stop kicking and just relax, each word punctuated by the crack of a whip. Eventually, Colleen went limp, trembling with pain, her wrists and shoulders burning. Now she could hear him moving around the basement. She tried to concentrate to figure out what he was doing, but it was impossible to see him. She could see something underneath her, a magazine. It was open to a page of a photograph of a naked woman hanging from the ceiling just like she was. He was clearly reenacting something he had been fixated on for quite some time. The man's heavy steps came towards her. She held her breath, bracing herself for more pain. There was a dull scraping noise. The man grabbed her ankles, navigated her towards something, and she could stand again. Then she heard him go upstairs. When he came back down, it was now with his wife. The couple began to disrobe, and then they had sex beneath her feet. What the fuck? I'm going to go ahead and kink shame here and say that if this is something that turns you on, you're a fucking weirdo. And that can't come as a shock, can it? I mean, you know you're a weirdo. When they finished, she heard the woman's light steps on the stairs. The door shut solidly behind her. Now she was with this man again. He abruptly yanked the support from under her, watched her dangle in pain for a bit more before pushing the ice chest back beneath her. The man then unhooked her wrists from the beam and took her down. He steered her across a short distance and forced her down into another of his strange contraptions. It was a wooden box, roughly square, and it stood about 3 feet high. One end was open, and he maneuvered her into it face first so that her bare back faced him. Grabbing her wrist, he lifted them, replaced the leather cuffs with chains. These were now locked to the roof of the box. Then she felt the pressure on her jaw suddenly loosen and the leather gag come off. She begged him to please let her go, but her words were cut short as the head box was again put around her head. She was trapped entirely inside, not one, but essentially 2 boxes, one around her head, one around her body. Now Colleen started to cry, her heart racing. She was having a panic attack. How the fuck could she not be having a panic attack? Can you imagine this happening to you? She tried to use this burst of adrenaline she was now feeling to yell, but she didn't know if anyone could hear her. Thudding against the side of the box didn't do much, right? It's evidently well built. The man then returned, removed her head box, and asked her why she was making so much noise. These fucking psychos never fail to make me laugh with just the dark absurdity of their reasoning. I bet he somehow was actually curious. Like in the fantasy he had built up in his head, he probably thought she was happy to have been kidnapped by him on some level. Maybe thought it turned her on to be taken by such a stud. What are you doing? Why are you crying and yelling? Why aren't you thanking me? Why aren't you overjoyed to have been chosen For this amazing opportunity, you're welcome. Colleen responded that she couldn't breathe. She begged him to take the head box off, but he only snapped it back on. He left for a moment, found something, returned with something she couldn't identify, fitted it around her chest, tightened it until the straps dug into her ribs. Now it was even harder to breathe. But that wasn't all he had retrieved. He put a prickly object between her bare legs, felt to her like a hair curler, small and bristly. She didn't know it then, but it was an electrical gadget designed to shock her. To his exasperation, though, the device failed to work, so he shut the box again and left her there. Finally, he went upstairs and went to bed. He needed some rest. Yeah, he had work the next day. Colleen Stan remained in the basement, her arms chained above her head, her legs tied, a mystery device between her legs, a constrictor cinched around her ribs, and a box and a blindfold on her head. She couldn't hear anything, couldn't move at all, could barely breathe. It would be, as you can imagine, a long, hellish night for her. For Cameron Hooker, however, it was a triumphant celebration. He found it hard to go to sleep, went downstairs a few times just to touch her bare back. It's like Christmas morning for him. Couldn't keep his hands off his new toy. In the morning, Cameron came downstairs, took her out of the box, then walked her across the basement, laid Colleen down on the rack, the wooden platform that he'd built. He now locked the chains that were still around her wrist to the hooks at the rack's top corners, tied her ankles to the ones at the bottom, and then he left her there, with the head box still on, for the rest of the day. He'd be aroused all day at work, thinking about her naked, right, waiting for him, panicking. That evening, Janice and Cameron finally brought down Colleen's first meal since her capture. Not sure if she pissed or shit herself, waiting for that. Sources don't relay that. I know I would have. If it would have been me, 100% for sure, I would have done that by now. Probably several times. My waste retention ability's not strong. Cameron let her up from the rack now, removed the head box, but the blindfold stayed on. Her dinner was a bowl of potatoes au gratin and a glass of water. After she had finished her meal, Colleen was permitted to finally use a bedpan, which Cameron later emptied upstairs. Not sure if he, let her wipe herself or not, or if he's fucking doing that, if he's getting off on that too. When she was done, the chains on her wrists were replaced by leather cuffs, and Cameron hung her from the ceiling again for a while. He just liked the way it looked, like knowing that it hurt her. Then he put the head box back on, chained her down on the rack, left her in the darkness again. A full 24 hours after her first meal, she would get her second. Cameron brought her down a glass of water, a plate with 2 large egg salad sandwiches, and let her up so she could eat. She ate half a sandwich, drank all the water, then told him she was full. The stifling heat of the basement, her fucking situation, had made her lose her appetite, and that pissed him off. "You should be grateful I brought this to you," he scolded. He told her she was wasting good food and demanded she finish it. Colleen replied, I'm just full. And now he's furious. He slapped the leather cuffs on her wrists, hung her from the beam, then whipped her until she literally passed out. When she came to, she was standing on the ice chest again, which Cameron abruptly then kicked out from under her, and he proceeded to beat her more. Finally, when he was done, he put the sandwich in front of her again. She forced it down, and he snapped the head box back on, locked her to the rack, and left. And that would be her routine for the next several fucking weeks. Cameron knew that keeping her on the rack, though, was only temporary. If she made enough noise, somebody might come down and find her. And if they did, she'd be in the middle of the room, easily visible. The police would be called. That would obviously not be good for him. So he had to figure out a different solution. Meanwhile, Colleen's roommates in Oregon are getting worried. When Colleen failed to return home on May 21st, her roommate Alice thought that maybe she'd gone to visit her mom in Riverside. But when Alice called Riverside, May 23rd, Colleen's mom said she had not heard from her daughter. Linda, the friend Colleen had been trying to visit, didn't have a phone, so Alice had to call the police in Westwood, who then checked in with Linda. Well, of course, she hadn't seen Colleen either. By Wednesday, May 25th, Alice knew it was time to file a missing persons report in Eugene. But nothing will come of it. There was no evidence that Colleen had been kidnapped or that she'd been held up in any particular spot along her route to Westwood. Nothing was happening on the outside of 1140 Oak Street to suggest anything unusual was happening inside. Like always, Cameron went to work. Nobody paying attention when he grabbed a little extra particle board, a little 2x4 here and there from the mill, brought it back home. Janice looked after the baby. Only rarely would she venture down into the basement. She was afraid of Colleen. So she took the shotgun with her when she did go down just to be on the safe side, which I guess makes sense, right? If I was tied up in the basement, I'm not going to worry about hurting somebody associated with my captivity to get out. One of the few situations in life where I would not have a problem tossing fucking anybody down the stairs. If they were standing between me and my freedom. Young woman, creepy fucking kid, elderly man, everyone in that house is a candidate for getting a fucking tumble, brick to the head, whatever it takes. This feels like the plot of some horror movie. Colleen would not figure out a way to escape. No one in her situation would be able to unchain themselves. Her only chance would have been when she was let up to eat, but the man, Cameron, he didn't even know his name yet, was much stronger than her. Her best chance, persuading him to let her go, but how was she going to do that? Her only chance was when Cameron came down around 8 o'clock after the hookers finished dinner, but he was only interested in feeding her the minimum amount, giving her some water, letting her use the bedpan, and then whipping her. What a crazy-ass routine. Just some dude at a lumber mill, living in a rented home, whipping a naked hitchhiker while his coworkers are grabbing beers at a local tavern or sitting in their lazy boys watching baseball games at home on TV. Cameron was also building something. She could hear him bringing stuff down, sawing, hammering. Took him about 10 days to finish his new project, which was another box. This one was about 3 feet tall, 6.5 feet long, with a lid that opened at the top. It was double-walled, so the interior was smaller, similar to a coffin. He put Colleen into this new box, a sleeping bag underneath her. The head box was taken off along with the gag, but she was still blindfolded, still naked. He then put a chain around her neck, locked the wrist chains to it before he secured her ankles. Then he put wax earplugs in her ears and shut the box. My God, that level of confinement and just sensory deprivation would freak me the fuck out. June 19th, 1977 was Father's Day, and 3 weeks after Alice Walsh reported her roommate missing. Colleen had been held captive for exactly 1 month. In Riverside, Colleen's dad, Jack Martin, was growing increasingly worried, of course. Colleen almost always remembered birthdays and other occasions with a card or a phone call. As it had closed in on a month since anyone had seen Colleen, the likelihood of a good outcome seemed further and further away. Colleen's parents drove up to Oregon to get her things, spoke with the police on June 25th, a Saturday. The police couldn't tell them anything new, however, and the parents headed back down, defeated, to Riverside, not knowing that as they passed Red Bluff, they literally drove within a single mile of their missing daughter. My God. Meanwhile, for nearly 3 weeks, Colleen had been in her new box. It had been 5 weeks since she'd been able to bathe, brush her teeth, wash her hair. Cameron had installed a blower, a makeshift device. It was really just an old hairdryer on a no-heat setting to circulate air through 2 small air holes drilled into the side of this new box. Kept her alive, but didn't do shit to keep her cool. And she had to listen to the whine of that motor at all hours of the day. Once in a while, Colleen heard Jan's voice from the top of the stairs, and one afternoon, Jan even brought her a glass of lemonade. Okay. But she didn't stop her husband from visiting the basement nightly to hang, whip, and occasionally photograph Colleen now. 3 months in, Cameron finally realized he needed to give Colleen a bath. She's filthy. She smelled like, well, someone who had been sweating in a fucking box in a basement after 3 months. Cameron decided to have a little fun with her giving her a bath. One August night after the baby was asleep, Cameron brought her upstairs into the bathroom where he tied her hands behind her back, taped over the blindfold, and taped over her mouth. Then he tied her legs to a broomstick and put her face down into a full bathtub. When the bubbles stopped, he brought her back up, let her breathe real quick, panicked, then dunked her again. And then he did that over and over at least 24 times. That motherfucker. Of course she thinks she's gonna die now. Then he summoned Janice in to wash her hair, but Janice could not untangle the thick mats that had formed, so she simply cut off chunks of it. Then Colleen, after suffering these new indignities, is led back downstairs and put back in the box. By the end of that first summer, Colleen's kidnapping and imprisonment was weighing heavily on Janice's conscience. She tried not to think about it, but she felt sorry for Colleen because she's not a complete fucking sociopath. At the same time, though, she's jealous that Colleen's getting more attention from her husband, Cameron, than she is. Dear God, she is becoming increasingly more fucked in the head. She wasn't going to leave Cameron, but she did want to get out of the house. A house with a trapped woman in the basement her husband loved to torment and photograph naked. So she found a job with Exitron, an electronics firm in the Silicon Valley. Though she commuted home to Red Bluff on the weekend, she started staying with her sister during the week. Not sure who was watching little Kathy while she's working. Maybe Cameron's parents, maybe hers, maybe her sister, definitely not Cameron. Meanwhile, more time away from his wife, more time with just his prisoner led to Cameron becoming more obsessive and fixated on Colleen, right? The girl in the box in the basement. He made some new whips, stocked up on more hardcore porn, developed photos he had taken of Colleen in his own makeshift darkroom, even built his own photo enlarger for his darkroom. Nothing fancy but functional. Sometimes he developed film while Colleen was sitting on the rack eating her with her plate in her lap. She could hear him shut off the lights, see the red glow out of the edge of her blindfold. He also started to experiment with new forms of torture. Once, while he had Colleen hanging by her wrists, he held a heat lamp next to her skin, watching her writhe in pain as it lightly burned her. Another time, he touched her with some live electrical wires. He hung her upside down, bound her in strange, uncomfortable ways. He made her give him blowjobs. Guess he and Janice had decided that was okay. Just no penis in the vagina or anal sex. He would strangle her while he was in her mouth, anything to increase his pleasure and increase her pain and fear. But then sometimes he would unexpectedly be kind to her. Like one morning when he brought down some pancakes for her. She would eat twice that day. And once or twice, he brought down some toast. But none of this offered any keys to his psyche, anything she could latch on to understand him, get him to release her. Whenever she asked when he would let her go, he would say, pretty soon. Finally, however, she did get a small victory. She learned his name. He had twisted at just the right angle so she could see Cameron engraved on the back of his belt. And of course, this dude would have his name engraved on his belt. Not surprised he's that guy. By the fall, however, Jan would be back full-time after only a few months of a half-hearted attempt at an independent life. As the temperatures fell outside, Colleen, still naked and chained in the box, felt the change. She was not wearing clothes. She had not worn clothes since May. When the mornings turned cold, she finally had to ask for something to wear, and Cameron gave her the Pendleton shirt she had with her when she was kidnapped. By November, Cameron decides to put her to work now. He decided that Colleen needed a place where she could work, a place he dubbed the workshop. He designed a small room to fit beneath the staircase, triangular in shape, had a door, a ceiling, even a light, like an oddly shaped closet. He gave it a concrete floor to add stability, carpeted the walls for soundproofing, then put Colleen in there with a pile of walnuts, told her to remove her blindfold and shell them. Weird. Then he bolted her in. For the first time in 6 months, Colleen could see, and she could move around. There was even a chair for her to sit down on. But then the next day, before going to work, Cameron came downstairs, put her back in the fucking box. That would be her new routine. All day in the box, all night, locked inside a different box called a workshop, where she was soon doing strange little art projects like macrame or crocheting. And then, this is fucking crazy, the hookers would load up the crafts she had made and sell them at a flea market in San Jose. Colleen Stan, no longer just her captive, she is literally a slave. Wonder if some of you listening maybe bought something she had made at that flea market, or had family members who did. Wish I had the address or name of that flea market. She would spend the fall and winter that way, along with Christmas, her birthday, and New Year's. She turned 21 as a sexually tortured hostage. The holidays did yield one surprise. Cameron gave Colleen a blue terry cloth nightgown, long and warm. She'd been complaining about being cold in the workshop during the night. Now she had something to wear. But also, Cameron is formulating another horrible plan. He had a vast collection of pornography, ranging from Playboy to hardcore, SM, sadomasochistic, and B&D, bondage and discipline publications. But they were more than entertainment, of course. They were inspiration. And Cameron especially enjoyed one underground magazine called Inside News, which he bought regularly. The January 1st, 1978 edition was particularly riveting for him. He looked at page 6. An idea hit him. He read it over and over again, then showed it to Janice. They sell themselves body and soul when they sign the slavery contract, it was headlined. Could they get Colleen to believe this? If she signed herself away, would she never attempt an escape, he thought? Cameron rented a typewriter. I forgot about those days. That's crazy. Days where you could rent a typewriter. I wonder if a place like that exists anywhere in the world now. I'd like to rent a typewriter. You're gonna need a fucking time machine? But Cameron rented a typewriter and had Janice type up a slavery contract. For the space-designated master, he instructed her to use an alias, Michael Powers, for himself and Janet Powers for her. Then he made a seal for the bottom of the page, an S with the cross through it. On the evening of January 25th, 1978, Cameron Hooker came downstairs into the basement. He opened the door of the workshop. Colleen is inside, without the blindfold, unrestrained, right, sitting in a chair. He gave her a clipboard with a paper and a pen, told her to practice writing her name. She didn't understand why he wanted her to do this, but, she did it as she's told. She doesn't want to be punished. Then he handed her a newspaper article and told her to read it. She read about how women supposedly were being forced to sign contracts that gave their bodies away. According to the article, this was not only common, it was actually legal. And this is all something they created. The women had no recourse. Their owners could do whatever they wanted, while some mafia-like organization hunted down and punished runaways. They know you're here, Cameron told her. And by them, He was referring to what he was now calling the company. The organization described in the fake article, a network of slave traders who profited on captured women. Now they knew she was there in the basement, and Cameron had to register her. Janice stood next to her husband, offering the contract. They're both so fucking crazy at this point. I felt sorry for Janice early on, but now at this point in the story, you're definitely feeling like fuck her and fuck Cameron. Right? Being afraid of your spouse doesn't justify this. She could easily at this point go to the police while Cameron's at work, bring the police over to the house, never worry about him hurting her because she could get immunity in all likelihood for agreeing to testify against him in court. He'd be arrested at work, never make it home again. But on some level, she's a coward, and her cowardice already helped get one woman killed, and now another woman's being tortured. In a perfect world, this story ends with Colleen executing both of them. Cameron gave this to Colleen, told her the company would take her away unless she signed it. Oh boy. I'm just going to read it here. This calls for some music underneath it. No, dude. Beaten off, I promise. This indenture, made the 25th day of January in the year of our Lord, 1978, between Colleen Stan, hereafter known as Slave, and Michael Powers, hereafter known as Master, witnesseth that slave, for and in consideration and in humble appreciation of such care and attention as master may choose to afford her, has given, granted, aliened, enfiefed, and conveyed, and by these presents does give, grant, enfief, and convey unto master all of slave's body, and each and every part thereof without reservation, every bit of her will as to all matters and things, and the entirety of her soul, together with all in singular, every privilege, advantage, and appurtenance to the same belonging or in any wise appertaining. Also, all the estate, right, title, property, claims, ego, and id of slave in, of, and to the same and in, of and to every part and parcel thereof, to have and to hold all and singular, the above described body, will, soul, and premises, with all appurtenances thereof, unto master and all of his assigns, forever. Not gonna lie, he put together a much more official, weird sounding, but official sounding document than I expected. Batshit crazy, but a lot of big words, some words I've never fucking heard before, that apparently he did use correctly. And no misspellings. And the said slave does covenant, promise, and agree. She shall immediately, diligently, and enthusiastically comply with and submit her full being to any and all directions or desires of master, or his assigns, which he or they may express by word, signal, action, or any other means. She shall at all times afford master absolute respect, shall address him only as sir or master, shall station herself in a physical position subordinate to his whenever possible, and shall speak to or otherwise distract him only when granted his permission. She shall constantly maintain her female body parts in such circumstances as will demonstrate and ensure that they are fully open to him. In particular, she shall never cross her legs in his presence, shall wear no undergarments any time, and shall cover no part of her body with apparel or material of any description except when the act of doing so and design of the item are expressly approved by him. She shall preserve her female body parts for the exclusive use of him and his assigns, which use shall be the sole source of her pleasures, and she shall engage in no self-gratification nor any physical contact with any others. He used so many big words right, but I'm pretty sure he fucked up exclusive. And slave does hereby, irrevocably, declare and acknowledge her everlasting unconditional dedication to serving master to his full satisfaction, and she ashamedly confesses that prior indulgence of her untempered conduct by others may have permitted her to become afflicted with inferior habits that may prove unsatisfactory to master, from which imperfections she implores master to free her by retraining with corporal punishment or any other means which he, in his unquestionable wisdom, deems effective toward directing her to her sole ambition and life destiny of perfectly fulfilling his every desire of her. In witness whereof slave has hereunto set her hand and master has designed to seal these presents by permanently affixing his collar about her neck on the date first above written. Obviously, Cameron's a fucking monster. But again, how the fuck is Janice rationalizing being a part of this? I mean, I guess she's kind of been brainwashed too. Colleen sobbed and shivered with fear. While she read this, she believed them about the company. Still, she asked what would happen if she didn't sign, and Cameron said that he would sign it for her and then make her wish she had done as he had told her. She also had no idea who Michael Powers was. Cameron claimed this was his company name. He said she had to hurry up. The company messenger was waiting upstairs, and finally she signed. Cameron told her that she now had to wear a slave collar for identification, a tight-fitting item made of stretchy gold metallic material. This whole thing is cost him $1,500, he said, but it was worth it because now that she was signed in, he could let her out to do things as the company would back him up. They would provide security, watching the house, monitoring the phones, and if Colleen ever tried to run away, they would catch her, torture her, and kill her. Then Cameron told her that Jan had been a former slave and tried to escape once. He was hitchhiking to freedom when a policeman spotted her, or she was hitchhiking to freedom, and the policeman picked her up. She thought she was safe, but the police officer, actually a member of the company, as many police officers are, and knew she had run away from her master. He took her back to her owners, who nailed her up by the hands as punishment. She hung for about 3 days, then went into convulsions, had to be taken down. But her punishment not over. She was put on a rack. Her legs were twisted, permanently damaging her knees and hips. In reality, Jan was wearing a knee brace at the time while he's saying this, because she just had knee surgery. After that, he continued, Jan had to go back to work for her owners. They ran a place in Los Angeles called Rent a Dungeon, a den of prostitution for members of the company, where any member could pay a fee, pick a girl, and take her to a dungeon where he could then torture her however he liked. And on a visit to this particular establishment, Cameron had noticed Jan, who was during all of this supposed only 15 years old. After her escape attempt, she was made to wear a cross, an indication that she had been marked for death. Cameron felt sorry for her. To save her life, he bought her, married her. Since then, he said, he had had surgery done on her hands to remove scars left by the nails. Colleen, her imprisonment, has of course not been good for her sanity, not been helpful as far as cognitive functioning goes. She buys this insane story. That does feel like something, to be fair, that Jeffrey Epstein and his fucking pals could have been a part of. Over the next few weeks, Cameron would tell more stories about the company, enjoying it like some kind of insanely fucked up improv exercise. He said he had to give her a slave name, and he decided on the letter K. Colleen thought she had no choice but to agree. After all, she had signed the contract. Now she believed that if she tried to do anything like contacting her family, the company would literally crucify her, then also kill whichever family member she told. But now she at least is allowed to come out of the basement. And they put her to work. They give her chores. Her chores are simple, mostly cooking, washing dishes, cleaning up. She does these chores without question, but that's not enough for Cameron. To discipline her more strictly, he makes up something called the attention drill. He says whenever he shouts attention, Kay has to strip off all her clothes as fast as she can. Stand on her tiptoes, reach her hands up to the top of the arched doorway between the living room and the dining room. She has to stand there, tense, naked, except for the slave collar, until he tells her she can relax. And he just fucking does this every once in a while for his amusement, and because it turns him on. A few weeks into this new phase of Colleen's imprisonment, Cameron showed her a typed receipt from the company, acknowledging the payment of $1,500 for the registration of Colleen Stan. He told her that he had used some extra cash by tracking down runaways, building up his company account. His father and brother, he told her, were no longer active in the company, but might want to borrow her for parties. Jesus Christ, Colleen believes him. She did as she is told, staying in the basement during the day, going upstairs at night to clean. Jan and Cameron are now old hat at concealing what's going on inside their house from the outside world. But tensions are now boiling inside the house. With Colleen free, or freer, Jan is now dealing with the fact that her husband's paying way more attention to a slave than he is to his wife. And she is, in addition to clearly being unhinged, jealous. And to test how much he liked Colleen, one morning, she asked him if he wanted to have sex with Kay, just like he had agreed he would never do back when they were planning to kidnap a girl. Immediately, Cameron went down to the basement, got Kay out of the box, brought her upstairs, naked, afraid, with no idea what's about to happen. He's all excited. He puts leather cuffs on her wrists, secures the blindfold around her head with tape, and gags her. Then he places her on the bed, proceeds to tie her wrists to eye hooks in the headboard and her feet to the bottom corners of the bed. Cameron then lays between the tied-up Colleen and the not tied-up Jan and starts kissing and touching both women. Then he mounts Colleen. Jan gets up, rushes out of the room to literally throw up. As much out of disgust as out of morning sickness, she is now pregnant with the couple's second daughter. Colleen can hear her throwing up while Cameron is raping her. He had officially crossed the one line he said he would not cross. And life is worse for Colleen than ever. The creep, who had been doing everything but raping her with his dick, is now also doing that. Then a few months later, Colleen will be left in the basement workshop for over 48 hours straight. Nobody came to get her, to feed her, to tell her what the fuck's going on. Had something happened to her tormentor, she wondered? Was she now going to starve to death in the basement since no one else in the world, outside of, people at the company, of course, knew she was down there? Well, finally, at around 3 a.m, Cameron comes down to get her. He blindfolds, handcuffs her, leads her upstairs, and puts her in the car. With Jen holding Colleen in place, they drive south on Main Street and out onto Highway 99. It's a short trip, about 5 miles. Then the pickup turns down a bumpy road, gravel crunching briefly beneath the tires before it comes to a halt. Colleen's taken out of the cab into the cool night air, led up some steps, goes inside a door, walks to the right. Her blindfold and handcuffs are removed, and before her is a large waterbed. Its headboard and sides upholstered in black, the whole frame raised on a high wooden pedestal. What the fuck? Now Cameron gestures towards a hole at its base, an entrance to a space beneath the bed, and he says, "This is where you're going to be staying." Indeed, the Hookers had found a new home for Colleen and for themselves. They'd bought an acre of land out beyond the city limits in a sparsely populated stretch of neglected property, some of it pasture, some of it just untended land dotted with wildflowers. Their new to them yellow and brown single-wide trailer stood apart, as they wanted, at the very end of a dirt and gravel lane just off of Pershing Road. They had a few neighbors, but no immediate neighbors, and it was theirs. They had bought it. They would not have to worry about a landlord ever stopping by. Cameron had built the waterbed himself, including the pedestal, figuring there would be no place to keep a slave except under the bed. She had to enter from the end of the bed, crawling in on her hands and knees. Once she was inside, Cameron placed a board across the opening that bolted it shut. Then he covered that with a panel that he'd cut specially to fit tightly into place, disguising the opening. My God, she's trapped underneath the bed now. It's like a strange monster reversal situation where the good person's under the bed and the monsters are in the bed. Finally pushed some steps up against the foot of the bed. Colleen completely hidden. Her routine wouldn't change much now. She would be let out for just about an hour or so a day in the evenings to eat, brush her teeth, use the bathroom, clean out the bedpan, and help with chores. About every 2 weeks, she'd be allowed to shower and wash her hair. Usually Janice prepared her only meal of the day, leftovers or sandwiches or something simple, which Cameron would bring to her. She would eat in the bathroom, sometimes work on macrame projects there, staying out of the box for a little longer periods. On Cameron's day off, he would take Colleen out of the box, put her to work in the yard, filling in ditches, cleaning pipes, hoeing weeds, even put her to work building a little shed, a little storage space where Cameron could work on his hobbies. This is all just so very strange. This is a weirder imprisonment to me than the Cleveland House of Horrors that we covered back in episode 375, the Ariel Castro kidnappings. A dead giveaway. I'm going to push this button.
Dead giveaway. Dead giveaway. My neighbor got big testicles because we see this dude every day.
Every day.
We eat ribs with this dude.
Ugh. As the Hookers and their slaves settled into their new quarters, May 19th, 1978 came and went, quietly marking the passing of a year since Colleen's abduction. The summer was more the same for Colleen, trying to survive inside the sweltering box underneath the fucking bed, working for the family and getting tortured. On September 4th, 1978, Janice goes into labor. She would give birth to their second daughter, Dawn, on the bed while Colleen is under the bed. Why? Why is she not having her baby at the hospital? Cameron must have gotten off on this somehow. I picture the weirdest birth scenario ever. Cameron delivering his own child, Colleen helping while under the bed, like he's yelling, "Nurse, I need scissors to cut the cord." And then just her fucking arm silently appears from under the bed, just holding those scissors. The new addition to the family presents a new problem. With gasoline prices soaring, high inflation, 5 mouths to feed now, money is tighter than ever. After some discussion, it's decided that Janice will need to go look for a job. But at 21, Jan still didn't have many marketable skills. Crazy that she's that young still. Oh, my God. However, she was able to land a job at Foster's Freeze, little fast food place on Main Street. Started work on April 21st, 1979, just under a month before the 2-year anniversary of Colleen's kidnapping. Serving up milkshakes, cones, fries, hamburgers, sandwiches. The pay is low, but it's better than nothing, and the hours work out pretty well. Wonder what the hell she talked about with her co-workers. Oh, I'm really dragging today. Whew, yeah, I'm tired too. Yeah, I slept terrible last night. The girl in the box underneath our bed is sick. Kept waking me up to go use the bathroom. What was that, Janice? While Cameron worked, she stayed home with the kids. While he got off at 4, they would have a brief overlap, and then she would start work at 5, working through the dinner hours until 8, or during the long summer nights as late as midnight. And that worked out well for Cameron. Once Jan had left, Cameron opened up the secret panel at the foot of the bed, got Colleen out, brought her into the living room, where she would kneel and ask what her master's bidding was. She could only eat when Cameron gave his permission. Sometimes she'd be allowed to sit at the table. Sometimes she had to sit on the floor. This level of control excited him, turned him on. He started pushing it further. He started taking Colleen out for exercise, making her run down Hog's Back Road, this long, winding dirt road that stretches east all the way to Lassen National Forest, with Cameron driving his daughters in the car along fucking side her. Jesus Christ. Then he made her swim laps in a nearby pond naked. Also still worked in his favorite activity, hanging her. Without a sturdy ceiling, he would use his construction savvy to make a wooden frame expressly for that purpose. And this is Colleen's life. This has been her life now. Some version of this for a couple years. In the fall of 1979, as a punishment for failing to follow directions on a macrame project, Colleen is strapped to the frame, shocked with electrical wires. She shocked several times before Hooker is finally satisfied that she had learned her lesson. Another time this fall, Cameron took Colleen out of the box, made her chug a bottle of wine. Then he said the company wanted him to give her a new obedience test, to have her perform oral sex on his wife, Jan, who was tied up in bed. Holy shit. The torture sessions, the rapes continue. The days of Colleen's imprisonment blur into months, seasons, years, marked only by odd instances of something out of the ordinary like kindness. Late in 1979, for instance, Janice asked Colleen what she'd like for a gift. Colleen didn't ask for anything at first, but after some thought, she got up the nerve to tell Jan that she'd like a Bible. Cameron and Jan bought one for her. The Hookers didn't present their slave with the Bible until January 11th, however, because that was the day they dated and signed it. Jan wrote in the Bible that it belonged to Kay Powers, using Colleen Stan's full slave name. Now at least Colleen had something to read, and she pored over it in the weak light of the bathroom. Around this time, Colleen's enslavement began a slow but dramatic evolution. She entered a period of relative liberty, a time that she would loosely refer to as the year out. She'd gradually be let out for longer periods, given more responsibilities with less supervision. She was allowed to work outdoors in the Hooker's vegetable garden, which she found to be such a joy that she would often start at the break of day, working outdoors in the fresh air. Meanwhile, babysitting Kathy and Dawn became Colleen's responsibility too, and that is so fucking wild. Those poor kids. They're also victims in this. Imagine what life will be like for them when they find out how fucked up their parents really are. In time, Colleen is even permitted to go into town to shop, to meet, to talk people, or meet with and talk to people. Things a now 23-year-old had not experienced for 3 years. Indeed, the Hookers didn't feel like they had much to worry about. Colleen seemed to have completely accepted that this was her lot in life, to be a slave for the rest of her life. She's hardworking, obedient, trustworthy. Cameron's still torturing her, though. He's justifying any torture he gives her as following company orders. He once told her, for example, that since she was being let out of the box, the company needed further identification, so Hooker inserted a gold hoop earring through her right labia. That's the price of getting to go out. Soon, her excursions weren't just to work or do errands. Early in 1980, the Hookers got her out of the box, told her to shower, fixed her up with some of Jan's clothes, gave her a new hairdo, bit of makeup. To her amazement, she's told she's going out dancing with Janice. What the fuck? It's so weird. Jan and Colleen went out of the town while Cameron stayed at home with the girls. At a local bar called the New Orleans, they drank beer, they danced, they even met a couple of dudes who invited them to Sambo's for coffee afterwards, some little diner. From there, they accompanied the men to an apartment. Jan and her coffee date went together into his bedroom, had sex. Colleen and the other dude stayed in the living room, talking very little until the other two came back out. Then Jan took Colleen back home, put her back beneath the bed. How is this real life? This whole thing was Jan's idea. Probably some attempt to make her husband jealous. But he didn't care. He gave Jan permission to date for a couple of months. She continued to date the guy she'd met at the New Orleans. But then that relationship quietly faded away. Wow. Then in January, Jan lost her job at Foster's Freeze. Sources don't explain why she was fired. Maybe he complained about the fucking lady under her bed too often. Cameron came up with another way to use Colleen to make money now. On Easter weekend, he took her to Reno. He had met another slave owner, he told her, who had bragged about how much money his slave had made panhandling at a concert. Cameron said he had bet that his slave could do better. And so for about 4 hours, Colleen found herself walking up and down the sidewalk asking strangers for spare change. She didn't get much, but all the money she did get, of course, went to Cameron. Wow, my God. By this time, more people had moved into the rural area around the Hooker's trailer, and the Hookers had come up with a story about the young woman who lived there. They said she was, Kay, their live-in nanny and housekeeper. And most of these neighbors found Kay to be a bit odd. Of course, Kay was not very friendly to them because Cameron had warned her not to speak to anybody. But some people took an interest in the hardworking young woman who toiled for hours in the garden, like Dorothy and Al Capa, the closest neighbors. They lived about 200 feet away. And they gave Colleen, or Kay as they knew her, a pair of Al's old jeans, lying and saying he had gotten too fat to wear them. Another time, they gave her a sweater, and when Dorothy noticed that she never wore a jacket, she went out and bought one for her. It was a small kindness. It was more than anyone else was doing for her. Meanwhile, in the summer of 1980, it's been 3 years now of this, Jan got a job at the Packout, a fast food place in Reading. Her shifts were during the day, and with Cameron at work too, that meant Colleen was out of the box all day looking after the girls. She continued to do as she was told. And this increased trust meant that Cameron no longer put her under the bed at night. Instead, he let her sleep on a sleeping bag on the floor of the bathroom. Chained to the toilet, though. How lovely. For Jan, working at the Packout meant that she was commuting about 30 miles to Reading and back each day. That was too much. She was losing too much money on gas, so after a couple of months, she quits, finds a new job in Red Bluff with a small electronics firm called JLA. And now Jan worked prepping parts or cutting out parts to fit onto assembly boards. JLA was doing great business at this time. They couldn't keep up with demand. Hearing opportunity knocking, Jan got her boss's permission to bring her work home. When Cameron came by to pick her up in the evening, they would load the small machine that cut the parts onto the car and would bring it with them. And then Colleen would work at night, doing this, putting these things together. And then Jan would return the next morning with both the machine and the newly cut parts. What the fuck? They truly do have a slave. This arrangement worked out well at first, but Jan's boss disliked paying time and a half for the extra work. He suggested that she fill in another job application so the work could be paid at a straight time wage. Jan brought home an application. Cameron told Kay to fill it out with her maiden name of Colleen Martin. JLA would issue checks for her for the work, which she then signed over to the Hookers. Fucking crazy. This missing person now, soon to be dead by law enforcement, and her family now has a job. They must have eventually worried about this alerting someone to Colleen's presence, though, so the Hookers allowed her to write some letters to her sister now, which she posted from a nearby town without a return address. And then soon, after she kept asking, Cameron allowed Colleen to call home from a payphone in Chico, a little college town about 40 miles southwest of Red Bluff. Over the phone, Colleen told her sister she's fine. Also learned that everybody was well back home except one aunt who had cancer. And though she had known at the time of her kidnapping that her stepmom was expecting, Colleen learned for the first time that in September of 1977 she had given birth to a baby girl named Leslie, and now Leslie was nearly 3. Cameron soon told her to hang up, and Colleen did so. And all of this, the increased freedoms, despite the continual rape and torture that she suffered whenever Jan and the girls left on a day trip or to see family, made Colleen grateful in a warped, twisted way. And around this time, she would tell Cameron that she loved him. For Cameron, this was proof that everything he had thought was right, that at their core, women just wanted to be dominated. He had achieved the ultimate relationship, and with that, he told her that he loved her too. He shared what he planned of their future. They would move to Lake Tahoe. They would have their own private cabin. They would have children together. Colleen, fucking hello Stockholm Syndrome, actually is happy to hear this. Jan, though, wasn't loving this. The relationship between Jan and Colleen is rapidly deteriorating now. Jan nagged Cameron to let Colleen go, but he turned her down. 1981 brings more bickering. Jan and Colleen fight constantly, each complaining to Cameron about the other. The tension in the house reached such heights and irritate Cameron so much, he decides to take action. He takes his wife and his slave separately out to Hogsback Road for some discipline. With ropes and whips, he beats the shit out of both of them until they agree to submit to his leadership. He kicked those 2 bicycles straight down into the ditch, then dragged them back up the hill, kicked them back down into the ditch, over and over, until they agreed to ride exactly as he wanted. Fuck this guy so hard. However, the situation between the women would not get any better after this. Finally, he decided that Jan would quit her job and take care of the girls, and Colleen would go back into the 6-foot-long sleeping box she used to sleep in under the fucking bed. I guess, I don't know how, roughly that long. Also, he tells her she'll get to visit her family soon. This gives him the opportunity to give her even more obedience tests, all ordered by the company, of course, like forcing her to put a gun in her mouth and pull the trigger. There's no bullet, but she doesn't know that until she hears the metallic click. Cameron Hooker then rises early. This is all, oh my God. Rises early the morning of Friday, March 20th, 1981, and calls in sick to work. It's been nearly 4 years now since he has kidnapped Colleen. Before the children get up, he gets Colleen out of the box, sneaks her out of the car, tells her to lie down on the floor in the back. They stop to get some gas in Corning, just a few miles south of Red Bluff. Then they pull onto the freeway, Interstate 5, heading south. Now Hooker told Colleen she could sit up. It's still morning when they pull into Sacramento, where Cameron said they would have to go undergo some tests that she would by the company, maybe getting tortured, or taking her through the Museum of Skeletons of Runaway Slaves who had been tortured to death, the company supposedly had. Cameron stopped outside some tall office buildings, told Colleen to wait in the car while he went into the company headquarters to find out what they wanted him to do to her. About 50 minutes later, Hooker exited the building, came to the car with some papers in his hand. "You're getting off easy," he said. "They don't want to see you. You don't have to go in." And now he took her to see her family. This is fucking bonkers. On the way to Riverside, Colleen rehearsed the story Cameron had given her. He was her boyfriend, Mike. He was dropping her off in Riverside on his way to San Diego, where he was attending a computer conference. They were engaged in the process of moving. That was why she couldn't give them a permanent address. On the way to her father's house, Colleen persuaded Cameron to stop at her grandma's for just a moment while she ran in to say hello. Hooker waited in the car while the two women, delighted at this unexpected reunion, made plans to go to the Seventh-day Adventist church together the next morning. Then Colleen rushed out and Cameron drove on. As they approached Jack Martin's small suburban home, Hooker pointed out that a surveillance team was stationed in a nearby trailer. He warned her again that if she said anything about the company, they would rush in and not only take her away, but also hurt or kill whoever she was with. They pulled up in front of her father's house. Cameron helped her carry her things to the door, small suitcase with a few clothes, some gifts she had made for her family. Then he walked back to the car and drove away. I fucking can't believe this is happening. This is a crazy level of mind control. It would be, of course, a strange visit. None of Colleen's family knew what to make of her sudden appearance, right? They're thrilled, but they also, of course, have so many questions. And they're angry. They're hurt by her disappearance, which seemed at the moment just to be completely voluntary and just arbitrary. And they're worried. She looks pale. She looks tired and unhealthy. She's walking with a limp. Her hair's matted. She has an angular figure, not the curve she used to have. At one point, her younger sister, Bonnie, bursts into tears and yells, "Why didn't you write to me?" Colleen said that she couldn't. And then it seemed to Bonnie that her sister was trying to tell her something with her eyes, but what? Next morning, Colleen went by her mother's house, then went to church. Then she went to friends and relatives' houses with her mom and Bonnie. Just a short while after Colleen and Bonnie returned to their father's, the phone rang. It was Mike calling for Colleen. He said, "It's time to go. I'll be there in 10 minutes. And Colleen's taken aback. She'd been promised an entire weekend at home, but barely 24 hours had elapsed. He must have gotten nervous. And then sure enough, Mike arrived. Someone insisted on taking a photo, and the couple posed on the couch. Then Mike said they had to go. They made one last stop to say goodbye to Colleen's mom, Evelyn. How the fuck did no one corner Mike and grill him about what the fuck is going on with Colleen? Who are these people? Colleen and the Camerons arrived back home early Sunday morning. And then Cameron raped her and then put her back in the box. Under the bed. Now her year out is over. Nobody except Cameron and Jan and their children, not the neighbors, will see her for another 3 years. Anyone who knew Kay believed she had left for Southern California. And in its own fucked up way, peace comes back to the Hooker household. Not for Colleen, of course. Her life's going to be more hellish than it had been in over a year. But Cameron and Jan took a couple's getaway, leaving Colleen in the box for 3 days without food, water, or cool air. Her only time out of the box will be at night now when they get back to help Cameron dig out an actual dungeon behind the shed. They dug a little each week, making the hole in the ground bigger and bigger until it's the size of a small room. Then he would put in a floor, build some walls, borrow a cement mixer from his dad, who apparently had met Colleen many times previously as Kay, but didn't know what the fuck is really going on over there. The plan now is to carry out his bondage and torture in this place she's building with him. Now that the girls are getting older, it's getting more difficult to hide, what's going on away from them, all the sexual shit. In 1982, Cameron and Jan get more into the Bible. Cameron loves it, especially for all of its references to slaves and masters, and he will end up giving both Jan and Colleen prayer hats to wear while they prayed. Oh my God. Though their prayer hats are really just fucking knit ski caps. I mean, why not? Why not throw some fucking weird religious insanity into this shit show? Pivot from kidnapping to cult. By the end of 1983, Cameron now believes that the Bible is an important tool for his domination. And he makes Jan and Colleen pray together 3 times a week while he's at work. And this is the first time that the women have spent together, in a long, long time that's not focused on toxic jealousy. But neither woman could ignore that the creation of the dungeon, or what it meant, the creation of the dungeon. Cameron is now speaking openly of getting more slaves, holding them in the dungeon and making Colleen train them. Holy shit. He is really turning into a cult leader of sorts. One who kidnaps members instead of recruits them. Now, each for their own reasons, Colleen and Jan pray that Cameron will not take anyone else. When the dungeon is finished, Cameron moves Colleen down there. It's actually better than the box, small but enough space to move around in, with a lamp, a lounge chair, radio, and a Bible. They lower her down meals once a day. Jesus. She will hand them a portable toilet to empty into the house's bathroom. But this new arrangement will not last for long. The dungeon soon floods, and Colleen goes back under the bed. December 31st now, New Year's Eve, 1983. Colleen Stan turns 27. 6.5 years. This shit's been going on for 6.5 years. Colleen had learned not to expect special attention or favors, but late that night, after the girls are safely asleep, Jan and Cameron get her out of the box, bring her into the kitchen. On the stove sits a birthday cake. To her surprise, the hookers sing her happy birthday. And after she's blown out all the candles, they all eat chocolate cake with ice cream together. What the fuck? Beginning in January, Colleen is now granted a few small liberties again. Nothing like she experienced in her year out, but improvements over her recent life. Most nights, she is now let out of the box for several hours. She's allowed to fix something for herself to eat. Afterwards, she can stay in the back bathroom to read or write poetry or do crafts. And though Colleen is still required to call Cameron sir, she now is calling Jan by name. They were against the odds, becoming friends, these two. Now they're hanging out not only for biblical discussions, but to help each other with housework or to chat over sandwiches and cookies. They discover everything they have in common, quick marriages at young ages, their love of kids, their loneliness, their fear. Colleen had been spared from torture for most of 1983 and 1984 so far, but Jan had not. The incidents ramped up to about 6 times a month. But with Jan, Cameron could not blame it on the company. So he told her that she's possessed and he has to get the devil out of her. Right? That's why he's hanging her. That's why he's whipping her. Of course, this guy is going to play off the abusive shit that his wife had been subjected to as a kid when her dad told her she's demonically possessed. May of 1984 now. It's been a full 7 years. Cameron changes things up yet again. Colleen will be allowed to go out once more, to babysit the kids, to talk to neighbors, to sleep on a sleeping bag in the living room, and to get a job outside the house. It's like at this point he's actually forgotten that he's kidnapped her and that he's been raping her for 7 years. Jan drove Colleen around to over a dozen businesses in the area where she filled out applications. Motels seemed to be a good place to try, anonymous and seedy. Colleen opened the door of King's Lodge, asked Doris Moran, the owner, if they were hiring. Doris hires her on the spot. With her new employment, this just keeps getting weirder. Colleen settles into another routine. In the early morning, she gardens. Then she washes up. She gets ready for work. Sometimes Jan drives her. More often, Colleen bikes the 3.5 miles into town. She works so hard at the lodge that she soon gets a promotion. She's the first maid ever put to work behind the front desk there. Doris, her boss, soon becomes very curious about Kay's home life. Kay tells her that Jan is like a sister, but also that she gave all her checks to Jan and Cameron. By early June, Colleen is given another freedom. Now she can go to church. The Church of the Nazarene is a large, airy structure with high beam ceilings on a quiet corner just a few blocks from downtown. Cameron's excited when Jan and Colleen start going together on Sundays and taking the kids. In his mind, their devotion to religion only benefits him, since they will now be more likely to accept his patriarchal control over them. Not a good assessment of religion, but also not wrong. Luckily, the pastor, Pastor Dabney, not the evil kind of Christian that Cameron is, like the fucking a lot of people are, sadly, the kind that take the Bible's most heinous messages and focus on those to serve their own twisted interests. He's actually a fucking good, Christ-love kind of gospel guy. Good dude, loving to save, trying to save souls. And he begins to take an interest in Colleen, and especially in Jan, who often will cry throughout services. One day, he decides to show up unannounced to the hooker's trailer, see what the fuck's going on there. It's a short social call, but he notices that everybody seems very nervous. A few weeks later, Cameron tries to spin the women's new interest in religion to suit his own plans. And he tells them the story of Sarah and Hagar from the Old Testament, how it proved that a 3-person marriage was biblical and that he could now sleep openly with Colleen. The biblical story of Sarah and Hagar is unfortunately an objectively creepy fucking story, if you're not viewing it through the lens of being religious. Because Hagar is raped by a man of God who is never punished, and she is never protected by God. Sarah is the wife of Abraham in the Old Testament. Hagar, the servant, reads slave of Sarah. God had promised Abraham many descendants, but 10 years after that promise, Sarah is still unable to have kids, and they're both on the verge of becoming too old to have kids at all. So Sarah now chooses to, not believe in God's promise, I guess, and she gives her servant, but really slave, to Hagar, in Hagar, to Abraham, in accordance with the customs of the day, so that Sarah could have a child, through her, but this is like some fucking weird Handmaid's Tale shit. It's not her kid. It's Hagar's kid. Just a bit of totally normal, godly sexual trafficking going on here. Oh, my heck. Gosh dang. Hagar conceives, and then Sarah begins to despise her husband's, new concubine of sorts. Sarah, in turn, begins to deal harshly with Hagar, to abuse her. Hagar flees to the desert to escape being abused by the woman who had fucking commanded her to fuck her husband. Then an angel of the Lord meets Hagar in the wilderness and commands her to return to her rapist, Abraham, and her human trafficker, Sarah. Later, God fulfills his promise to Abraham and Sarah gives birth to a son named Isaac. And God never ever punished Abraham and Sarah for doing something very similar to what Cameron and Janice have done to Colleen. What the fuck? Make that make sense to me. You would think, God being omnipotent and all-powerful and all, that since he had already spoken to Abraham and Sarah, he could have spoken to them, again, and spared Hagar from being raped. That story is fucking gross. And while there are for sure far more good, wholesome verses than bad ones in the Bible, this is an example of why so many creepy sex-based cults are able to use scripture to justify their creepy fucking deeds. Because there are creeps in the Bible who do creepy shit. People who we would for sure arrest and imprison today for being sexual predators. Fucking wild. Cameron used that creepy shit to try and justify some more debauchery, including that Colleen and Jan should also have sex, and that he should watch, biblically speaking, and then they should have threesomes, as God wishes for them. Amen. This time around, God, this does, not trying to fire people up, but this does remind me, I'm like, oh yeah, you don't even have to twist all the scripture to form a cult. It's just right there, just as is written. This time around, this kind of shit doesn't make the women jealous of each other. In fact, the more that Jan thinks about it, the more she realizes that Colleen is her best, closest friend, and the only other person alive who understands how abusive and manipulative Cameron is. Finally, she feels guilt, real guilt, over her role in all this, over how this whole time she'd been lying to Colleen about the company and other shit. She seeks out Pastor Dabney, asks about Sarah, Abraham, and Hagar, realizes that her husband has been using the Bible against her. He's interpreting this in a different way, which I know you can do, but what the fuck? Why is it in there? But despite knowing that Cameron was manipulating her and that she was manipulating Colleen, she's still afraid to do anything. However, just days later, she tells Colleen that she is thinking of leaving. Colleen begs her not to leave her with Cameron, but Jan can't take it anymore. At the end of July, she begs Cameron to literally kill her now, and he would gladly strangle her until she will pass out, but he will not finish the job. So finally, in August of 1984, Jan decides to approach Pastor Dabney again. She asked him some provocative questions about the whole Sarah-Hagar situation, right? Fucking make it make sense to me. Sounds more like a love triangle than sexual slavery, as she has it explained. Still, Dabney advises her that they are living in sin. And now, at long last, Jan decides to come clean. On August 9th, 1984, Jan shows up at the King's Lodge Motel, takes Colleen aside, and over 7 years into this, tells her everything, like the whole truth. Tells her the company's not real. It's definitely a lie. Everything she's been told. About Jan being a former slave, about the surveillance, nothing more than lies and manipulation. Both women sob. Colleen quits on the spot. They decide to make an appointment with Pastor Dabney and tell him that Colleen has been held against her will, that both women have been forced to endure sexual torture for years on end. Dabney tells him to get the fuck out of town. Well, he probably says, get the heck out of town as soon as he can. I was annoyed when I first read that he didn't take them to the police right away, but they didn't want to go to the police. And also probably better to put some distance, a lot of distance between them. Get Jan's two kids out of there, hopefully. away from Cameron, get the fuck out, then go to the authorities. They decide to pick Cameron up from work and have a regular night like nothing has changed, then to leave when he is away at work the next day. And that's what they do. Arriving the next day at Jan's parents' house in Gerber with Kathy and Don, and then Colleen from there calls her father, asks him to wire her some money so she can take the bus home. He does as she asked. Why can't fucking Jan drive her down there? But whatever. Before she gets on the bus, she calls Cameron, tells him she knew that everything was a lie and he has no ability to keep her any longer. And that piece of shit now just breaks down and cries. For Jan, getting away is not going to be so easy. Cameron phones her over and over again, begs her to come home, and eventually she gives in. What are her parents doing in this situation? What the fuck? Now Cameron, I forgot her parents are pieces of shit. Now Cameron does seem to change. He starts going to church with her, talking to Pastor Dabney. What? Pastor Dabney tells him to get rid of all of his porn, his photographs, objects of torture, right? Ask Jesus for forgiveness. Fuck these people when it comes to forgiveness, but okay. September, Jan will suggest that they burn all the bad shit associated with imprisoning Colleen, and they do. Colleen. Sorry, it's spelled Colleen. But Colleen, anyway, meanwhile, will spend the first weeks of her freedom filling in her family on the last 7 years. She also cannot resist contacting the hookers. She talks to Jan on the phone, sometimes twice a day, and she's still talking to Cameron. Once he even he calls her, asks her how to make a tuna fish sandwich. How the fuck are no members of Colleen's family taking a trip up north to kill Cameron and fucking bury him in the woods? Colleen refuses to go to the police, no matter how much her family begs and begs and begs. On September 19th, Colleen writes to Jan, "If you get any more angry phone calls from my cousins, I don't know what to tell you except they're not forgiving. But I do not want to play God. I forgive you. And Cameron for all things. It's done." No, it's not, Colleen. Let your God forgive him if he chooses. Let the authorities punish the fuck out of him. Make sure Cameron doesn't do that to somebody else again. Not so easy for Jan to put the past behind her. Though Cameron seemed like he would change at first, now she's beginning to doubt it. She's terrified he's going to start all over again, kidnap another girl, brainwashing her, keeping her as a slave, because that is what he's going to do. Finally, she leaves with her daughters for good. And in a doctor's office in Reading, Jan ends up confessing everything they had done to a very confused receptionist named Connie Fleming. She just breaks down. Connie tells her to tell everything to Pastor Dabney, why not the police? But anyway, which she does November 7th, 1984. And now finally with all the info, I guess he didn't have it all before, Dabney picks up the phone and someone finally calls the Tehama County Sheriff's Office. I'm back into Pastor Dabney now. Under Sheriff Mike Blanusa, Detective Al Shamblin will arrive at the pastor's office, hear the unconsolable woman's story, and then they get more than they bargained for, more than even Connie or Pastor Dabney bargained for, because Jan starts telling about another girl, young woman named Marliz Spanicki, but quickly gets afraid when they interrupt her to tell her her rights. In the following days, Jan will be offered immunity, a deal that will go through Friday, November 9th, and now she'll tell them everything. November 12th, 1984, detectives finally track down Colleen Stan in Riverside. Al Shamblin takes down Colleen's hours-long statement, delivered in mostly an embarrassed whisper, about how she'd been kidnapped, about the slavery contract, the company, the boxes, the rapes, everything, the torture. Back in Red Bluff, police try to take Jan to see if they can find the gravesite Cameron had dug for Marie Elizabeth Spanicki, but she can't find it. Then, even without a body, with so much evidence already gathered between what Colleen and Janice had shared, early on Sunday, November 18th, Lieutenant Jerry Brown and Detective Shamblin drive out to the Hooker residence. They find Cameron at home, advise him of his Miranda rights. He invokes his right to remain silent, saying he wants to talk to a lawyer. Then he's taken to the Tehama County Jail. On November 19th, 1984, the day after Hooker's arrest, Police Chief John Faulkner releases the first scraps of information to the press. Declining to give full details, he discloses only the essentials: that Cameron Hooker had been booked for kidnapping, rape, sodomy, and assorted other charges. A short article headlined "Police Arrest Suspect in Kidnap Sex Crimes" is the first glimmer of a story that will prove to be the Daily News' biggest scoop ever, not only dominating the local paper's front page many times through the year, but drawing a lot of media attention from all around the world. By the next day, more details had emerged, and a picture of Cameron Hooker accompanied a front-page article titled "Police Sex Victim Held 7 Years." The quiet little California town immediately becomes a media sensation. Reporters from around the country, some from outside the country, fly in to question law enforcement officers, ask the district attorney's office for updates, pester neighbors who become so exasperated with sightseers and the press that one finally puts up a private road sign on a public street to try and deter them. Internally, Red Bluff residents are reeling. It seemed impossible to them that in such a small, tight-knit community, somebody could have held a woman captive for 7 years, and that the woman hadn't said something when she was let out. You'd think that if something like that happened to someone, they would have stuttered a lot or would have been malnourished, but she was very outgoing. She always had rosy cheeks, Doris Moran, Colleen's former employer at the King's Lodge, told the San Francisco Chronicle. Mr. and Mrs. Letty, the little old couple who'd rented 1140 Oak Street to the Hookers years earlier, politely answered reporters' questions, but denied the story was true. I don't understand this, Mrs. Letty said. She had freedom, shopping and all that. Besides, the Hookers to her seemed like normal people, too normal for all that jazz. One family was particularly bullish on Cameron's supposed normality. His parents. For more than a decade, Harold and Lorena Hooker had quietly owned a 20-acre ranch off of Highway 99 south of Red Bluff near the town of Gerber. The Hookers found it impossible to believe that Kay had been kept against her will. She'd come over with Jan and Cameron a number of times. They'd seen no evidence she'd been kept by force, nothing strange, no bruises, no scars, not the slightest indication she was anything but a babysitter. It seemed to them that she got along well with the girls, with their son and daughter-in-law, and that she was free to come and go as she pleased. They were prepared to find a lawyer who would tell that to a jury. Indeed, one of the area's most expensive lawyers, Roland Poppendick, is who they hired. Fuck yeah, bro. Somebody named Poppendick has entered the chat. Sounds more like an STI than a person. Shortly thereafter, Roland Poppendick seated himself across from Cameron Hooker in the attorney visiting room of the county jail, a pane of glass separating them across a shared table. When Cameron was brought in, clad in his blue inmate's uniform, Poppendick appraised the lanky 6'4" fellow, introduced himself, and started asking questions. And the first was, how did you meet Colleen Stan? And Cameron didn't think twice before replying with, I kidnapped her. Well, there you go. Meanwhile, Deputy Attorney Christine McGuire knew she had a hard road ahead of her despite him admitting to the kidnapping. She'd been on an out-of-town trip when the case first broke. Her first day back in the office, she heard all about it. Weird evidence like a stretcher, a head box, something like a coffin. And this wild-ass case was going to be hers because she was the office sexpert, the specialist on prosecuting sex offenses. And Hooker was due to be charged with at least a dozen felony sex crimes. She had not come by her area of supposed expertise naturally, just fell to her as she was the only female prosecutor in the DA's office. And she couldn't stand the disgusting attitudes of many male members she had met in law enforcement locally that tended to boil down to, well, didn't she enjoy it? The fuck is wrong with so many people? Fuck is still wrong with so many people. Why is it so hard for so many people to understand that rape and other types of sexual assaults are just obviously wrong? The consent is very easy to understand. Nobody wanted to take a lot of the county's sexual assault cases seriously, so Christine McGuire did, and hail Christine for that. And she was able to advocate for victims and for herself in part because she was one half of a power couple locally. She was married to a good dude named James Lang, the DA, and a man who had been a cop for more than 20 years, or about 20 years, excuse me. Hail Jimmy Lang as well. They didn't mix their work and personal lives, or they tried not to, but it did give Christine a certain amount of legitimacy that she wouldn't have had otherwise in a male-dominated office. By the time that the Colleen Stan case arrived on her desk, Christine was an expert at prosecuting sex crimes, and yet this case still threw her for a loop. Didn't make any sense to her. Didn't make any sense to almost anyone. That Colleen Stan claimed to have been held against her will, yet had ample opportunity to flee. When she finally went home in August of 1984, she hadn't even contacted the police. And the most glaring flaw in this case, the incident that made McGuire really cringe, was that inexplicable trip to Riverside back in March of 1981. How could she possibly explain that to a jury? For that matter, how could she explain it to herself? Making matters worse, she barely had a week to prepare for the preliminary hearing, juggling her other cases with a new baby at home. Luckily, Detective Al Shamblin would hand her first big break, a slide that was hidden in a sketchbook. And that slide showed the slavery contract. McGuire's first meeting with Janice Hooker came on the heels of this exciting discovery on the afternoon of Tuesday, November 27th. And while Janice was able to identify the box of evidence, the head box, the whips, assorted photographs, and magazines, she was visibly upset to learn that they'd found the slavery contract, as well as nude photos of Jan herself. But while Jan was upset, an interview with Colleen would find her vacant. She was the most passive person Christine McGuire had literally ever encountered. She didn't seem to have any rage at all for her captors. She had buried her trauma so deep, probably had to survive. She was now living with her father and his wife, holding down a full-time job, going to church, meeting new people. She commuted daily to her job at a hospital where she was doing what she'd learned to do so well over the past several years, clean, and she didn't seem like a victim. How would the prosecution make this work? Deputy DA McGuire entered the courtroom the morning of December 5th to see if Cameron Hooker would be indicted. Cameron, wearing a flannel shirt, gray cords, two-tone blue ski jacket, was brought over from the jail to take his seat next to Pop and Dick at the defense table. First, Janice testified, and the jury heard a recounting of the kidnapping, as well as the first several months of Colleen's captivity. But when it came to the slavery contract, Janice became non-responsive. She replied in hushed monosyllables, claimed to know very little about the contract or how it came to be signed. Right? She's probably nervous about, I don't know, or just ashamed or something, I don't know. Christine McGuire needed to shake her up to get her to say something really damning, but she didn't know how. Well, actually, it would turn out that Janice had taken a double dose of Xanax and Desyrel, an antidepressant, before she'd appeared in court, and it kicked in. And the prosecution's question of Janice ended on an uncertain note. Things did not start off well. Then something worse for the prosecution would be revealed while Pop and Dick, working for the defense, questioned Janice. Janice and Colleen had gone to bars to drink and meet men. Throughout the next day, Pop and Dick would question Janice, making it seem like Colleen's captivity had been overblown, and moreover, that Janice was jealous of her. Then they called Colleen Stan, and the prosecution got her to recount the kidnapping as well, but just like the interview, her tone is flat, unemotional, like it hadn't even really happened. Finally, the judge ruled. Luckily, great judge ruled in the prosecution's favor. Judge Murray ruled that Cameron Hooker would have to face charges of kidnapping, rape, sodomy, oral copulation, and rape with a foreign object, calling the case, quote, extremely serious, and to put it mildly, bizarre, and declaring that if the charges were true, Hooker, quote, would certainly be a danger to the community. The judge maintained bail at $500,000. But that didn't mean Christine was getting off easy. She was still a relatively young lawyer with an exceedingly complex case, facing off against fucking Captain Pop and Dick, an older, more experienced opponent. Now Christine made a decision. She wanted the box, the bed frame, the waterbed. She didn't want the jury to look at the box and decide for themselves if Colleen's story was legit. She wanted each member to get inside of it. So detectives went back to the Hooker's trailer and got it. This would be the beginning of a bifurcation in the case, or bifurcation in the case, On the one hand, there was so much evidence, much of it physical, ranging from the photos to Cameron's insane structures to witnesses corroborating stories. On the other hand, the legal side was a mess. With so many crimes occurring over a long period of time, the Hooker case had a major statute of limitation problem. And in searching for legal precedents, Christine McGuire found nothing comparable. Kidnapping, enslavement, prolonged captivity, sadomasochism. Colleen Stan had endured a singularly brutal ordeal that there was simply no precedent for. So, Christine dug deeper. First, she would need to work around the 3-year statute of limitations for kidnapping. Since Colleen had been kidnapped in 1977, it had technically run out. She would end up researching Parnell versus Superior Court, a case that dealt with the boy Stephen, who was abducted in 1972 by Kenneth Parnell and Irvin Murphy. We actually covered that crazy abduction story way back in episode 236, the Yosemite Killer and the Abduction of Stephen Stainer. Serial killer Cary Stainer, a.k.a. the Yosemite Killer, was Stephen's older brother. Yeah, the Stainer family, if you recall, put through hell. Parnell basically convinced Stephen that he was his son, traveling with him and enrolling him in schools as Dennis Parnell while abusing him sexually. But beyond that, there was little abuse or restraint. Stephen was not kept there by force, was allowed to stay with friends, like go to sleepovers, ride around on his bike, join various school teams even if they traveled. He believed he had to stay with Kenneth, so he always came back to his fucked up, abusive pseudo-dad. Then in 1980, Parnell abducted another boy, 5-year-old Timmy. When taking Timmy to the police station, officers started questioning Stephen, who eventually admitted that yes, he had been abducted as well. This time, the court waived the statute of limitations in prosecuting Parnell. It was a, quote, continuous kidnapping. So far, the only one ever prosecuted in the United States. Parnell had used his authority as a parent to make Stephen stay. So what had Hooker used to make Colleen stay? Jan already had offered her explanation, brainwashing. But that would be difficult to prove in court, seemingly something from the realm of science fiction at this time more than psychology, even more so because Colleen seemed so stable at the moment. Meanwhile, A startling story is published in a Chico newspaper on December 20th, 1984, same day that Hooker was arraigned on 18 felony counts. It was headlined, "Hooker Being Probed in Another Abduction." The article was the first public disclosure that Cameron Hooker was suspected of having kidnapped and murdered Marie Elizabeth Spanicki, that 18-year-old Chico woman whose murder we covered back in 1976. Sergeant Earl Summers, chief of the Chico Police Detective Unit, told reporters that Janice Hooker had given police a detailed account of the 5-foot, 5-inch, 110-pound woman's abduction, murder, and burial. Other newspapers quickly picked up the story, and as the news spread that Hooker was suspected of murder, his defense attorney noticed a change in the tenor of public opinion. Since Hooker's arrest in November, Roland Poppendick had received calls from irate friends, relatives, and coworkers who wished to testify on Cameron's behalf so they could tell the world what a nice, upstanding young man he was. But after the Chico story, all that shit changes. Now they don't want to testify for him at all. Now they're like, fuck that guy. It was time Poppendick decided to seriously consider a change of venue. Meanwhile, in January, Christine keeps researching brainwashing. The only case where brainwashing had a legal precedent was a famous and controversial one, the case of former Suck subject Patty Hearst. We already know what happened, but a brief recap to happen not too far from where this story happened. February of 1974, 19-year-old heiress Patty Hearst, kidnapped and, like Colleen, subjected to isolation, humiliation, and terror. After about 2 months, her captors, the Symbionese Liberation Army, pressure her into joining their cause. They give her a new name, Tanya, and as Tanya, she participates in a bank robbery with them. To the outside world, looks like Patty Hearst had heel turned into radical leftism, but to Patty, a girl who had never had much experience with the outside world beyond luxury estates and private tutors, much less with the chaotic world of 70s reactionary groups, she had no idea what to do. She had no inkling that she could ever be found liable for what she did under the SLA's command. But still, she would be sentenced to 7 years in prison. The jury found her guilty of robbery and using a firearm to commit a felony. It was a bad precedent for the concept of brainwashing, but what else did Christine have? Finally, Christine accepted that the mind control issue was unavoidable. If she was going to bring it up, she knew she better become an expert and fast. Luckily, experts had already started to call from across the country, specialists who had worked with hostages, cult victims, even with Patty Hearst. They used terms that Christine and many in America had not heard: coercive persuasion, Stockholm syndrome, involuntary conversion, PTSD. They sent her stacks and stacks of material, won't even send her a video. It was an entire field she didn't even know existed. Now it became clear that the intense isolation and abuse Colleen had endured had done more than hurt her physically. It had shredded the fabric of her personality. Now Christine would have to prove that to the jury. Ideally, the judge would allow expert testimony. Otherwise, Christine would have to rely on the potentially drugged-up Janice Hooker. She set up interviews with 6 specialists, mostly in the San Francisco Bay Area. She would also meet with experts who had worked on the Parnell case. But which one would be the best for her case? She'd have to decide quickly. Trial date's now set for February 20th. Meanwhile, Roland Poppendick had his own plans. With less than a month before the trial date, Roland Poppendick filed a change of venue motion. McGuire not surprised. She'd expected this. The story had swept across Northern California. Right, intensive coverage had, left her assuming that was going to be the case. While it was being decided, the trial was postponed. But by February, Colleen was now in financial trouble, and the postponement of the trial date had made her anxious. In her mind, she's worried it might never happen. She retained an attorney to file a civil suit against Cameron. While Christine thought that was a bad move, it made her seem like their story was had a financial motive. And also Cameron Hooker, he had no money. Christine talked to the attorney. He agreed not to proceed until the criminal case was over. Then she retained Dr. Chris Hatcher, who had a lot of expertise on kidnapping, and the added benefit for Christine's rural community of wearing cowboy boots and speaking in a thick Georgia drawl. He would be the one to suggest that Cameron's stash of torture devices and porn be categorized in the realm of fantasies they helped him act out. Slaves and masters, kidnapping, mind control, bondage, sadism. That way they could prove that Hooker had a blueprint to go off of when he kidnapped Colleen. On March 8th, there was a change of venue hearing in Judge Watkins' chambers. He decided to put it in the hands of another judge, Stanley Young, because a local paper had implied he would not grant the change of venue because of cost to the county. In Judge Young's presence, Cameron Hooker was brought in, looking thin but well-groomed. Didn't seem fazed by the attention. He was smiling, chatting up with his family behind him. Christine thought his attorney, Poppendick, was making a huge mistake. Cameron was a local boy. Colleen Stan was an outsider. He was more likely to get what he wanted if he stayed in Red Bluff. But to her relief, and Poppendix, the judge did grant a change of venue motion. Christine would spend the next 2 weeks with Colleen and her mom, Evelyn, making sure that their story was rock solid now, and Christine began to see why Colleen had such a flat affect. Wasn't that she didn't care about what happened to her. She just seemed to believe, after the life she'd had, that she was doomed. By May, another issue surfaced. The county didn't have enough money to take Cameron Hooker to trial. This is crazy. It was estimated they would have to lay off between 20 and 50 county employees. I can't remember hearing something like this before, but I guess it makes sense, right? If your county only has so much tax money to pull from, and if suddenly you have to pay lawyers and legal experts a lot of money to cover a long and complicated trial, you might have to cut a bunch of other shit to cover the trial costs. 20 to 50 county employees in danger of losing their jobs, specifically because Cameron Hooker was a fucking degenerate doing crazy, degenerate shit. Now the pressure mounts for the DA's office to offer Cameron a plea. The plea is scheduled to be taken the morning of June 10th, 1985 in Judge Watkins' court. It's planned that Deputy DA McGuire will drop the sex counts, and Pop and Dick will enter Hooker's guilty pleas to the kidnapping and the remaining minor charges. The case will then be referred to Tehama County Probation for a sentence recommendation, and Hooker will be incarcerated for at least, 2 years or so. 10 at most. Fucking wild. Originally, it seemed like, he was going to get over 100. All of this is crushing to Christine. She decides she has to do as much research as she can before June 10th, and she finds something interesting. She discovered that not trying him will be in violation of Penal Code Section 1192.7. It prohibits plea bargaining serious felonies for any reason other than insufficient evidence or lack of testimony. In other words, not having enough fucking money to prosecute, not a valid reason for Cameron Hooker getting off easy. So Hooker's going to trial. They'll just have to come up with the money somehow. It'll be postponed again, but then scheduled to take place in Redwood City in the court of Judge Clarence B. Knight. Not sure if those people sadly lost their jobs or not. To avoid keeping the findings regarding the murder of Spanicki out of the case, Hooker will also give the prosecution a boost. He'll admit to kidnapping Colleen Stan. Sadly, though, because authorities were never able to locate the remains and verify Janice's claims, no murder or other charges were ever brought against Cameron for Spanicki's kidnapping, torture, and execution. Her remains still have not been found to this day. Jury selection will begin September 24th, 1985. The defense eliminated anyone with a history of being raped or abused. The prosecution favored college-educated women, dismissed men with blue-collar jobs. Finally, the jury was chosen. 5 men, 7 women, mostly middle class. Some were in their mid-20s. Some were retired. 1 was widowed. 2 had never married. Most of them non-religious, active, with strong community ties. They will be read the list of Cameron's charges. 1 count of kidnapping with special allegation of having used a knife. 7 of rape. 1 of forced oral copulation. 1 of forced penetration with a foreign object. 1 of forced sodomy. 3 of false imprisonment. And 2 of abduction to live in an illicit relationship. Then it was time for opening statements. Christine McGuire provided a laundry list of the torture Colleen had endured and segued into the brainwashing, describing how Cameron had kept her on an invisible leash. So much so that she didn't even call the police when she was free. Just as an infant develops an attachment even to the worst of mothers, so did Colleen, she said. That's fucking great. The defense took a different tactic. They began by casting doubt on Janice Hooker's credibility, portraying her as a guilty party, indeed the person whose idea it was to make Colleen their slave. Pop and Dick enumerated her many freedoms, how she'd been able to leave, hold a job, talk to neighbors, go jogging, go shopping, even visit her family home. And he said she loved Cameron. Their relationship was unusual, but it wasn't criminal. And Janice, knowing her husband was more devoted to Colleen than to her, told her about all the lies because she wanted Colleen to cut off the relationship. Janice would be the state's first witness. But this time, she wasn't on any medication. She would describe everything, aided by photos and reconstructions of Cameron's devices and an image of the slavery contract. Day by day, she walked the jury through the kidnapping, how they had convinced Colleen that she would never be free, how Cameron had planned to keep captive as many as 4 slaves in his dungeon. But on cross-examination, Pop and Dick made it seem like they were all just a happy but unconventional family, giving the jury photographs of the 3 adults and 2 kids vacationing together. Colleen would take the stand October 3rd. Wearing a pastel blue dress, her hair cut shoulder length, she looked pale and fragile. She was, of course she's fragile. She recounted her kidnapping, how she'd been forced to wear the head box. She recounted every humiliating and violating thing that had been done to her. When Pop and Dick cross-examined her, he made it seem like the story of the company was so crazy that nobody could actually believe it. Rather, he said Colleen was looking for a reason to stay at the Hooker house and invented the company by herself. Then he pulled out the love letters Colleen had given Cameron. I seem to be falling deeper and deeper in love with you, one said. Another said, I feel a strong love and need to be with you. I'll always serve you with singleness of heart. Colleen couldn't easily explain those. All she said was she didn't know why she wrote them. After Janice and Colleen's long stretches on the stand, the parade of subsequent witnesses would go by quickly. Neighbors and family members spoke about how they had known the Hooker's babysitter. Colleen's family talked about her weird trip to Riverside. Then little Kathy Hooker testified. The 9-year-old daughter of Cameron and Janice spoke about how she wasn't allowed to go in the bathroom or into the shed or into her parents' bedroom. Young Dawn Hooker, too, Cameron and Janice's other daughter, would testify. Her testimony was about the hole where she wasn't allowed to go. Following the girls, doctors testified about the state of Colleen's body, her thin hair, scars on her breasts, thighs, and wrists. Then Dr. Hatcher, a psychology expert, testified about manipulation tactics that had been used to break Colleen's will. And he said that the inconsistencies in Hooker's behavior, for instance, letting Colleen take a job, did not mean that he was not a sadistic mastermind. It was that the sadism was now geared towards proving his complete and total control over Colleen, because at a certain point, the only thing that was more thrilling than keeping her hostage physically was keeping her hostage mentally. Well said. All Pop and Dick could do was point out that some of the tactics, overexercise or withholding food, were used by organizations like the Marines, and that wasn't illegal. Fuck you, Pop and Dick. Trying to normalize this shit for the jury, you piece of shit. October 18th, 1985, Cameron took the stand. He admitted to kidnapping Colleen, but said that by the end of the first night, he had started to, quote, feel real bad about everything I'd got myself into. He said he planned to let her go, but Colleen described the house, said that she knew where they lived, planned on reporting them, so he couldn't do it. But he said he hardly ever hung Colleen. I barely did it. Because the bondage with her didn't work, he said, and he had no interest in having sex with her. He framed her initial period in the basement as a sort of drug detox, saying that she kept asking for drugs in her purse, but he wouldn't give them to her. He's a good guy. He said the slavery contract was Jan's idea, as was the concept of the company. And once Colleen signed, she came upstairs every night, had dinner at the dinner table with him. She even agreed to move with them when they decided to leave Oak Street, saying that she would hang out and help. Finally, she asked outright if she could move in permanently. He spread his arms and said, welcome to the family. In his version, he had basically fallen in love with Colleen, and she had fallen in love with him. And it was fucking Jan who carried out the torture as revenge. Christine McGuire hammered him on cross-examination, but he stuck to his story. More witnesses would be called, the extended Hooker family, a psychological expert named Dr. Lundy, who testified for the defense, saying that coercive persuasion or doing something not in line with your values while under duress only applied if somebody was physically restrained or had a gun to their head, a.k.a. not Colleen Stan. And the question now was, who would the jury believe? Before closing arguments, the jury was excused while a few final motions were heard. All the false imprisonment charges, counts 12, 13, and 14, had already been dropped on technicalities. Pop and Dick now moved to dismiss counts 15 and 16, both charges of abducting to live in an illicit relationship, contending that the law written in 1905 was unconstitutionally vague. Judge Knight agreed that in 1985 it seemed impossible to define an illicit relationship, and those two counts dropped as well. 11 felony counts remained. McGuire reminded the court of the horrible ordeal that had befallen Colleen Stan. Pop and Dick said that this was a matter of people's private lives, what they did behind closed doors, and with that, the jury is left to deliberate. Deliberations would drag on for 3 days. At around 3 p.m., October 31st, Halloween, 1985, the jury returned and informed the court they were still hung on one count, and an alternate juror swapped in to debate that count. Just 25 minutes later, I guess that alternate juror was persuasive. At 3:25, they're ready, and Cameron Hooker is found guilty of 10 of the 11 felony counts. He showed no reaction, and court is adjourned. 3 days later, Cameron called Colleen. At first, she didn't recognize his voice. Then he said, "This is Cameron, and I just called so that you can chew my butt or say whatever you want to me." That is fucking weird. Colleen replied, "I have nothing to say to you," and hung up. Good for her. I kind of wish you would have said, fuck you, I hope you fucking get raped in prison to death. But, whatever. The sentencing of Cameron Michael Hooker, scheduled for 9 a.m., November 22nd, in the court of the Honorable Clarence B. Knight. Cameron entered wearing the orange jumpsuit, and then his attorney had a surprise for the court. Pop and Dick claimed Judge Knight had been prejudiced against Hooker, basing his claim principally on statements he said the judge had made in chambers or in the hallway, such as that Hooker would have felt at home with the Spanish Inquisition, pretty funny and accurate, that Hitler would have liked the defendant, also accurate, and that the most sadistic thing Hooker ever did was force Poppendieck to work on his case. I love Judge Knight. Judge Knight denied all of it. I hope he said that, and I hope he fucking lied. Go suck a bag of dicks, Poppendieck. Colleen's attorney then read a statement from Colleen asking that Hooker be put away for as long as possible. Judge Knight then spoke. I consider this defendant the most dangerous psychopath that I have ever dealt with, in that he is the opposite of what he seems. He will be a danger to women as long as he is alive, and I intend to sentence the maximum possible. Fuck yeah. I said the fuck yeah part, not him. I wish he would have said that and ended that with like, fuck yeah, bro. Citing Hooker's, quote, pattern of violent conduct and high degree of cruelty and callousness, Judge Knight sentenced him to consecutive sentences for the sex crimes, totaling 60 years. He then imposed indeterminate sentences of 1 to 25 years for the kidnap, plus a 5 to 10 year sentence for the use of a knife. In the California Board of Corrections, if the California Board of Corrections chose to apply the full terms, Hooker would now serve a maximum sentence of 104 years. Hooker was expressionless, except for a slight grin, when the judge also fined him $50,000. At the end of the hearing, he turned to Poppendieck and said, I want to thank the judge for me. No, excuse me. I want you to thank the judge for me. I have a library, a gym, and time to enjoy them. And it's better than living with those two women. God, just a fucking piece of shit consistently. Good rationalization, but of course, it was Colleen that really won. Aside from the personal victory, California's Victim Witness Program awarded Colleen more than $20,000. Her civil suit against Cameron Hooker reached an out-of-court settlement with the Puritan Insurance Company, insurers of the Hooker's mobile home. They agreed to pay her a total of about $150,000. Not their fault, but glad you got some money. And now some more good news. Colleen always wanted kids of her own. And on April 23rd, 1987, she gave birth to a healthy baby girl. Also got an accounting degree. And she began volunteering for the Redding Women's Refuge Shelter. Redding Women's Refuge Center. Good on her there. Hail Colleen Stan. Then things did get rocky. As a New York Daily News article would recount, misery followed her, a string of failed marriages, and a troubled child now in jail. However, she seemed to eventually rebound from that turbulent time. And of course, there was going to be turbulence. Imagine how much going through all that she went through would fuck you up, would fuck me up. 2016, Colleen told People magazine she was still living in California, having just married for the 4th time, and she was raising her then 2-year-old grandson. She said that she had a wonderful life and had been having a wonderful life since she'd escaped. She was very grateful to be alive. She said, your life is just kind of in limbo when you're in captivity, and once you get that freedom back, you have that choice again. It's just like the gates open, and you just run for it. Janice Hooker also ran for it. She filed for divorce January 28th, 1986, changed her name, went back to school, got a degree in social work. After sentencing, Cameron Hooker was shipped to the California Diagnostic Center at Vacaville for evaluation. Then he began serving time in Folsom Penitentiary, where he would have his appeal denied March 8th, 1988. Good. For a while after that, he was incarcerated at the California Institute for Men in Chino, but then was released on parole, kind of, to the Department of State Hospitals in 2021. Why was that done? Well, because some new bullshit California law regarding releasing elderly inmates early. And you know what? Fuck that. No one should get a senior citizen discount when it comes to violent and or sexual crimes they were convicted of. I don't care if they're a fucking 120 years old and have to crawl from their cell to the, lunchroom, whatever. Who gives a shit? Fuck them. California's been always been way too soft on these kind of crimes. He was eligible for full parole in 2022, but the Tehama County District Attorney in California lobbied to get Cameron designated as a sexual violent predator, a designation that would keep him in prison until death did his danger to the community, potentially. The proceedings regarding this possible designation delayed his hearing and parole eligibility. In April of 2024, Cameron's hearing to determine whether he will be designated a sexually violent predator, again delayed to August the same year. That month, it was announced that a state hospital evaluated Hooker, and he was deemed positive for classification as a sexually violent predator. He has not changed. And hail Nimrod that they did the right evaluation, and they're going to keep him in there. His next parole eligibility hearing will not be until 2030. He will likely be turned down again. Let's hope he dies before then. He's currently 71. He's going to be turning 72. Right? Could happen. If he does somehow get released in 2030, could someone please take one for the team? Kidnap his creepy old ass. Put him in a box. Put the box under their bed. Take him out sometimes to hang him up by his wrists, naked in the basement, whip him, shock him, shove shit up his ass, while forced him to suck some dick. I mean, it feels fair, doesn't it? Feels more than fair. Maybe read him some scripture while all that's going on. And that's it for this timeline.
Good job, soldier. You made it back. Barely.
All right, going to share some final thoughts, but before I do have another quick little sponsor. Hey, are you tired of life bending you over? Tired of getting kicked while you're down? How about instead of just continuing to take it, you turn things around and flip the script? It's high time you put a cock and butts on the case and start taking what's rightfully yours. When you hire the law offices of a cock and butts, you don't just get some legal advice. You get some litigation action and satisfaction. As a listener of this podcast, there is an almost 100% chance that you were recently auditorily assaulted. Not only was it released on the wrong damn day, and I'm talking about last week's episode, it was filled with some wrong damn sounds of a pervert loudly moaning and slathering up his manhood with a preposterous amount of lotion and intensely masturbating for way too long. Did you ask to hear that? No, you did not. Did you want to hear that? I doubt it. Are you still recovering emotionally and otherwise by that unprovoked, savage, disgusting attack? I can't see how you couldn't be. So how about we get you some justice? Let's get you paid. Call 1-800, no more listening to lotion up jerk-off sound beds. Don't worry about how many numbers that equals. Join a class action lawsuit against Bad Magic Productions today. Here at the law offices of A Cock and Butts, we will be dedicating ourselves to keeping A Cock out of your ears. It's not your fault. It's not okay. And Dan Cummins needs to pay. Call 1-800, no more listening to lotion up jerk-off sound beds. When you hire the law offices of A Cock and Butts, you don't just get a cock, you don't just get butt, you get a cock and butts. For a price so low, it's nuts! Wow. Been a long time since you've heard from that law office. Not since episode 401, The Broomstick Killer. Probably shouldn't have sold ad space to a law firm, dedicated to filing a class action lawsuit against me. Not my best business decision. Now that that's over, Colleen Stan, the girl in the box, the tortured victim of Cameron Hooker's evil fantasies and Jan Hooker's fear and passivity. The girl in the box who spent 7 years actually in a variety of boxes over 7 years, from an initial head box to a platform built in the Hooker's basement to her ultimate prison under the Hooker's bed in their trailer. But her physical captivity, only part of the torment. The psychological prison, just as powerful. Cameron convinced her that he belonged to a vast, violent organization called the Company, and that if she ever tried to escape, both she and her family would be killed. This invented conspiracy theory / improv game effectively made her believe that she had no chance of escape. Even if she did, she'd be hunted down and killed. And that was what allowed Cameron to have her do things, like babysit his kids, go out to bars, get jobs, do errands, while she seemed to the outside world like a happy woman in her 20s working a nannying gig. Cameron wouldn't have been able to do what he did without the help of his wife, Janice, who agreed to have a slave because it meant less pressure on her to comply with Cameron's twisted fantasies. So fucked up. But also, she didn't want any of this. And in the end, she was the one who told Colleen the truth, that the Company was not real, and helped her leave. So what do we have in the end? Yet another example of a man who let his sexual fantasies rule not only his life, but others' lives as well. A man who nurtured the sexual fantasy of having a girl who could not say no from age 16, if not earlier, and eventually devoted all of his energy that wasn't going towards work to keeping a young woman kidnapped, subdued, and available to him to rape and torture. And though Jan is an extreme example of helping somebody with dark fantasies, a degree of it is something we have seen before. Across our catalog of episodes, how many partners have turned a blind eye because they didn't want that violence focused on them? How many parents, siblings, friends have figured there was just something off about their son, brother, friend, but it just wasn't worth getting involved, right? Colleen Stan's case is one of the most extreme examples of what happens when somebody turns a blind eye to someone else's darker desires, or goes along with them, hoping it will make them happy or to keep the peace, but it's not worth it. If you have a partner like that, or somebody you know does, get the fuck out, or help them get out. Call the police, get help, go to a shelter, do anything but doing nothing. It's normal to say no, to draw boundaries, even though Cameron Hooker wished it wasn't. And also, one last thing, I found this episode surprisingly inspirational. How? Well, despite what Colleen Stan went through, she still found moments of joy. She took up hobbies. She enjoyed working outside in the garden. She held down a job She was a fantastic employee, cared for her oppressor's children, found moments to laugh, to love, to smile. Reminds me of former Suck subject psychologist and neurologist Viktor Frankl, finding small moments of joy, things to look forward to while imprisoned in a Nazi concentration camp after most of his family had been murdered. What another crazy testament to the strength of the human spirit. Colleen went through all that over 7 years of imprisonment, rape, so much torture, of being forced to sleep in a variety of small boxes for so much of that 7+ years, and she still built a life for herself afterwards. She dated, she got married, she got divorced, she dated, married again 3 more times. She had a child, raised a child, is raising a grandchild. Yeah, of course she's had her struggles. How could she not? But she's also volunteered, helping to, working with, to help other women in crisis, right? She got an accounting degree. Imagine she's, living a pretty good life right now. And if she can live her life, if she can find moments of joy and purpose and things to look forward to after all that, what's your excuse not to do the same? What's my excuse? Right? Thank you, Colleen Stan. Thanks for not letting that bastard grind you down and inspiring the rest of us. Let's move to the takeaways.
Timesuck Top 5 Takeaways.
Number 1, Colleen Stan was kidnapped by Cameron and Janice Hooker and taken to their home in Red Bluff, California on May 19th, 1977. The then 20-year-old was going to be Cameron's slave for over 7 years, a role he had fantasized about since he was a teen when he wanted a girl who couldn't say no. He used his talents at woodworking to create a head box, a platform, eventually a box under a waterbed to keep Colleen in for most of the day, a cramped, claustrophobic arrangement that would be hard to tolerate for 10 minutes, much less long periods of confinement spread out over 7+ years. Number 2, Cameron knew he couldn't keep her by force forever. It would be much easier to make her think she couldn't get away, and that was where he got inspiration from his vast collection of magazines. He forced Colleen to sign a slavery contract, making her believe that there was a shady company out there that dealt in sex slaves and would punish whoever got away. This control extended over her wherever she was, whenever she was eventually out on her own. The company was always watching. They'd bug the house, had eyes on her family. They would hurt them if she wasn't careful. And it was the company that required Colleen to be tortured, subjected to attention tests, and all kinds of cruel shit to justify Cameron getting his sexual rocks off. She wouldn't know the company was a big fat lie until 1984, and when she found that out, she immediately left. Number 3, Janice Hooker would play an interesting role in all this. Undoubtedly, she was one of Cameron's victims. She was groomed into acts of abuse that she didn't even know were sexual as a young teen, basically forced by her isolation and secrecy and shitty parents to become his child bride, and essentially didn't know a life that wasn't all about avoiding becoming a target of Cameron's strange experiments. She also helped him kidnap a victim, though. She knew that was wrong. She bargained a baby out of it. She mistreated and abused Colleen, whether out of convenience, she was an easy punching bag, or because she was jealous. She maintained the fucked up improv game of the company for years, but she also did go to the police when nobody else did, not even Colleen. Where does she sit in all of this? Should she have gotten immunity? I don't know. Number 4, Cameron Hooker, after a legal battle that was almost as strange as the circumstances that inspired it, full of people insisting that actually Colleen loved him, that he was just in an unconventional arrangement, he'd ultimately be sentenced to a maximum 104 years in prison. Let's obviously hope he stays there. And number 5, new info. In 2016, a 2-part docuseries called Colleen Stan, The Girl in the Box, aired on A&E. You can rent it now on Apple TV, Amazon Prime, Roku, YouTube TV. If you want to dive further into this case, you should watch it. Colleen was interviewed for this, so let's hear from her over 30 years after her ordeal is over. In addition to the narrator, you will first hear from Christine McGuire, that awesome attorney who prosecuted her case. Also from Jack, her dad. A lot of the interview is played over a clip of an adorable scene of her in her backyard garden playing with her cute little grandson.
Christine McGuire is now in private practice in Santa Cruz.
This case was the most challenging case I've ever done, both before and after. It was a one-of-a-kind. It will never happen again, but it taught me so much about the human spirit.
She's a strong girl to go through all that torture and it's a wonder if she didn't lose her mind.
Oh, no, don't write it backwards. You'll tip over.
People always say, why are you so normal after all this? And it kind of ticks me off, but and I always tell them, the crazy person is the one that's in prison.
Gonna give Grandma a flower? I don't know.
As for happy endings, Colleen went through the worst kind of hell and survived.
I'm not going to say my life's perfect. It's not. Life happens, you know? But the good thing is that I know that God's on my side, and I know that no matter what happens, He's going to see me through it.
Colleen is a true survivor. She got a job, she had a family. To this day, she moves forward as a survivor.
Look at your face.
I really hope that my story helps people so that they can move on, because I want to get on with my life, because I want to live life to the fullest. I still have lots of things I want to do with my life that I haven't accomplished yet, so I'm not going to give up.
Wow. Just like Viktor Frankl. She's still making sure she has a lot, or like he did. She's still making sure that she has a lot to look forward to. Lots of things she still wants to do. Let's all follow her lead.
Timesuck Top 5 Takeaways.
The girl in the box has been sucked. Thank you to the Bad Magic Productions team for your help in making Timesuck. Thanks to Queen of Bad Magic, Lindsay Cummins. Oh man, she was the main driving force behind this year's summer camp, and she fucking killed it. It was so fun. Thanks also to Logan Keith, who also killed it at Bad Magic Summer Camp this year, helping to publish this episode, designing merch for the store at badmagicproductions.com. Thanks to Sophie Evans for her research. She was also at the summer camp, and she had a blast. Also, thanks to the All Seeing Eyes, moderating the Cult of the Curious private Facebook page. Some of them were there. Some of them fucking Mod Squad from Discord were there. Oh, man. Poncho and others. Fucking Becky from Discord. Really, Kelly. Everybody at the Timesuck subreddit, Bad Magic subreddit. And now let's head on over to this week's Timesucker updates.
Updates? Get your Timesucker updates.
First up, we got a message from Cummins Law Sucker, William Pomerlow, sent it to Bojangles at timesuckpodcast.com with the subject line of "You finally got me." And William wrote, "Hey, bad magicians, just wanted to drop this Cummins Law while it's still fresh. Love the show, longtime listener. I'm former infantry and experienced ego death at 17, so now at 42, I didn't think I could be got. Well, my wife isn't a giant fan of the show and will only tolerate it when I'm driving for long distances. I just got home, just finishing the latest Moses Sitole suck, which, by the way, not one shithole joke. Well done. We're all grown up. And I pop into the bathroom. My wife leaves and takes my car, which picks up the Bluetooth from my phone. I just heard the high-pitched time suck as I shut off my car. Apparently, she heard the dude slow stroking, loud as hell, with you asking about if it's gay or straight, annoying or funny. She called me wondering what kind of homoerotic podcast I was listening to. Once I explained it was time suck, it was cool. I thought it was funny. But for just a moment, she thought she didn't know her husband. 6 out of 10 stars. Nimrod, Lucifina, keep on sucking, Playboy, bok bok. William, man, thank you for service, and thanks for taking that in stride. Oh, I wonder if she still does have questions, your wife. Concerns. I almost Cummins Law myself, actually, with that video, or with that audio. I was at a summer camp when I uploaded it. Now, sitting in this camp little coffee shop that would be frequented by the staff. This is like before the event really gets going. Didn't have my headphones on because I was in there alone, checking the file to make sure it sounded okay. And I just thought it was fucking funny and just so uncomfortable. I turned it up pretty loud. I was cracking up. And then I turned it off just in time before like this young female staff member walked in to just me sitting by myself in a big room, listening to a guy vigorously jerk off. And then later, I played it on my phone for Lindsay when I was joking about it with Logan and some of our friends, and she legit got upset. She's like, "Turn it off. Oh my God, turn it off." Actually covered her ears. Shot me a look of true disgust. And one of the spaces on Patreon messaged me to say that she violently ripped off her headphones when it started to play. Thanks so much for even though I never played it. Fake news. It did not happen. Thanks for the kind words. And I hope you keep enjoying the show. Next up, Suck Psychonaut. Sam Portacci has a warning for us all with this message. Sent it with a subject line of New Orleans LSD lasting longer than normal. Oh, did it? I wrote, "Hello, I'm a true lover of psychedelics. I'm 43 now. Typically take 3 trips a year. I prefer DMT or shrooms, but that was not always the case. When I was 20, a friend and I split a 100-dose vial of acid. 100 dose. Hindsight. Never, ever do that. I knew that it would be at least 48 hours. On day 4, it would not stop. It wasn't visual anymore. It was a pure panic attack. I actually had to go to my mom's house and tell her I think I ate too much acid. Poor lady had no idea how to respond. She's the best human on earth. Also, she has never done any drug ever. That's what you think. Anyways, I had the horrific panic that all LSD lovers have experienced. The only problem is that it lasted 3 months. Yes, roughly 90 days. So when, so when I heard you say that you don't know anyone for who the acid lasted too long, I had to write in. I did make it back to Earth eventually. I'm now a proud father of the world's cutest daughter, a husband of 23 years, a very good listener to crazy stories. I, for some reason, can sympathize with anyone who, after that experience. Also, this might make you laugh. My first trip ever with LSD, I was in the car with my mom driving. I hadn't taken it, I had taken it, excuse me, because I didn't believe my friend who told me that a drug could be a little piece of paper. I don't think she knows my first trip was with her. If she did know, she'd probably just giggle and say, that's not surprising. Anyway, thank you for the content. I love expanding my mind, but now I know not to rip it in half. My God, Sam. So essentially, you took 50 fucking doses at once. That when I first read that, it felt like it was going to give me a panic attack just thinking about it. That's torture. I've never done more than 5, and I didn't like that. I'm real good now with 2. Maybe I would take 3 at some point, but 50? That sounds about as much fun as asking somebody to follow me around all day with a little hammer and just bop me on the head. How the fuck did you not end up in a psychiatric facility? Benzodiazepines and antipsychotics can supposedly be trip killers, but you should not take them without medical supervision. But yeah, don't wait months, don't wait days. Go to the doctor. Tell them that you took a brain-destroying amount of LSD and get yourself in a psych ward so they can get you the right medicine to fucking kill it. Also, I love your mom. She sounds awesome, and I'm glad your mind made it through all that. And now, an update to an update. Twin spawn Jordan James is a liar, and he made fools out of us all. And he came clean, though, with the following email. So it turns out I'm a dumbass, he wrote. Hey, Dan, it's me again. Jordan, lying James. Excuse me. So our vacation is over, and we are driving the 14 hours home. Oh, I'm sorry. The following email had a subject line of, turns out I'm a dumbass. So our vacation is over, and we are driving the 14 hours home. We stop at my aunt's house, my dad's sister, to visit. While we are there talking, my dad and uncle come up. Turns out the thing I believed for who knows how long is a lie. My dad's twin brother's first name is Carl, not William like my dad, which, makes a lot more sense. I don't know if my brain has turned to mush from drinking too much Whipple, or if somehow I got Mandela affected into another timeline, or if, the most likely culprit, I'm just not the sharpest bulb in the knife drawer. But apparently I've been confabulating my uncle's first name for as long as I can remember. God's honest truth, I'm 34, and I swear to God, I have no memory of his first name being Carl. Anyway, I thought you deserved to know that I'm an idiot, or a liar, or both, but at least it made for a good story. If you want to know some actual true things about my father's side of the family, there are apparently 27 sets of twins in the James or Welch, my grandmother's side, family. Small part of the reason my wife and I have not tried for children because fuck raising 2 of me. That kid was a handful. Also, apparently the twin bond runs deep. Family lore says when my dad and uncle were 18 or 19, my dad was in the Navy in Vietnam, and my uncle was working on his car or as a mechanic. This was 68 or 69. The car my uncle was working on fell on him due to a jack failure, injured him pretty badly. My dad's halfway across the world, wakes up in the middle of the night, runs to the communications room, calls or radios or fucking carrier pigeons home. They're old. I don't know what they had back then. Anyway, he got a hold of his mom, immediately asked what was wrong with Ronnie. She had only just heard a few minutes before what happened. That's wild. Also, my grandmother was herself a twin. She was named Addis. Her twin was named Gladys. Anyway, thought I owed it to you to come clean after finding out my whole life was a lie. Yours in humiliation, Jordan James. P.S. I wished my beautiful wife a happy anniversary in the last email, which we got to hear together, and she loved, thank you, but I didn't even mention her name. Amanda is still awesome. I'm still lucky she sticks with me despite my apparent mental deficiencies. Also, she says she's down to be your best friend as long as y'all get a secret handshake. Man, I love you, Jordan James. Another funny message. So glad you could finally learn the truth about your uncle. Also, cool story about your dad feeling your uncle's pain half a world away. Stories like that, if it really happened, you liar, are what led to my fascination with the paranormal. I'm convinced, there's a lot more to this world than science understands, that there's some magic out there. Also, Addis and Gladys, that's ridiculous. How many times did one kid start to respond when somebody called for the other one? And yes, Amanda and I can be friends. Thank you, Amanda, for agreeing. I'm guessing Amanda has loads of funny stories about you to entertain me with. Thanks, dude. And thanks, everybody who sends in the messages.
Thanks, time suckers. I needed that.
We all did.
Well, thank you for listening to another Bad Magic Productions podcast. Be sure and rate and review Timesuck if you haven't already. Check out Nightmare Fuel. Man, it was so fun doing the live Nightmare Fuel at the camp. Please and thank you. Don't fucking kidnap anybody this week. Don't put them in a box and sexually torture them for the next 7 years. Unless it's Cameron Hooker, who somehow you just broke out of prison, out of that little hospital. Then, yeah, do whatever you want and keep on sucking.
Bad Magic Productions.
Are you nervous right now? Still be listening? Are you afraid of what you might hear? This is not a jerk-off video. It's really not. It's an ASMR video on YouTube. Fully clothed, young woman putting lotion on her hands. A lot of lotion. It's called ASMR lotion. It's on ASMR, Lena's channel. Totally wholesome. Over 14 minutes long. Who is this for? It has over 95,000 views. Who is soothed by this? Posted 5 years ago. The fuck is going on in the world? What's wrong with us? The simulation is broken. No, it doesn't sound great. Why is she whispering? I think the jerk-off video was better.